Thursday, October 8th, 2020. The time is now 6 p.m. Board trustees present are Winfred Adams Jr., Kelly Hodges, Deborah Jensen, Justine Durant, Jana Gonzalez, Dawn Davis, and myself, Rhonda Newhouse. I would like to ask everyone to turn off or silence their phones or electronic devices at this time, please. Thank you. The first order of business is a review of the minutes from previous meetings. Does any trustee have any changes or corrections to the minutes of the September 3rd, 2020 board work session or the September 8th, 2020 regular meeting? Hearing none, these items will be submitted as part of the consent agenda at the October 13th, 2020 Board of Trustees regular meeting. We will now hear from our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rodney Watson.
Thank you, President Newhouse and other trustees who I welcome to our first meeting back here in the boardroom. Since our last conversation, we have welcomed back all of our in-person students, and I'm proud to announce that Mark and I and Chief Colbert have gone to all of our campuses almost 3 times, and we've really had an opportunity to visit with teachers and administrators and children, just really looking at how their transition back to school has been. In addition to that, over the past 3 weeks, we've had opportunity to have small groups with groups of teachers. And so we've taken time to meet with K-2 teachers, a representative from across the district, as well as 3-5 groups of teachers, as well as the middle and high school teachers. And each of those individual settings, it's been really interesting to hear from the teachers around all the things that are going well, but also the struggles that they have as they're adapting to in-person and remote learning at the same time, or for the buildings who chose to do it separately, just hearing their experiences. And so we're going to continue to do that. I think one of the best ones that we've also had was, I did have an opportunity to meet with my student group this past week as well. It's been very interesting listening to the comments of our students as they learn to either be in person in this COVID crisis, or also those that decided to come back to school. I think it's been quite interesting, especially listening to our high school students, our seniors who have gotten used to being able to participate in their classes remotely. I talked with them specifically about their transition and don't they miss their friends? And they said, well, we interact on social media all the time. It's the same. And so we are still seeing our friends, but it has been a transition for parents. I've heard from a lot of parents as well. Some of the parents are extremely pleased with what's going on. Some parents want more in-person, more remote instruction for their child while they're still at home. And so we've had mixed conversations, but also mixed experiences from different families. And so we'll continue to reach out and keep a touch point of that. Tonight, we are going to have 2 specific presentations. We've talked with you a lot about the beginning of the year data, and so we are going to share our beginning of the year data with you. We are going to also talk a little bit from an equity lens as we begin to look at our data per our charge that you all have for us this year. In addition to that, in our last meeting, we talked a lot about finding ways to get more feedback from the staff. And so we're also going to present to you our survey that we've given this fall to really get a touch point or a pulse of what's happening in our schools, in addition to the qualitative data that I've been getting. And so that does conclude my report for tonight. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Newhouse.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Our next item is agenda participation. This item allows members of the public an opportunity to speak on agenda items before those items are considered by the board. Mr. Brinkley, do we have anyone registered to speak under agenda participation tonight?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So for our next item, I would like to recognize our Chief of Innovation and Communications, Tiffany Dunn Oldfield.
Good evening, President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, esteemed members of the board. We do have data, as Dr. Watson was mentioning, to present to you this evening. Two of the binders, we're going to start with this binder. You can see the green covered binder. We're going to start with our staff survey. If you remember at our last board meeting, we had presented our parent survey. We had gone back out to our parents for a second survey. This is the staff survey that you asked for, and I'm going to pull up and present that data to you now. Is that presenting? Let's see here. You guys, I'm not getting the presentation mode here. Wait, hold on one second. I'm not getting it to come up in presentation mode on my screen.
She's sharing.
Let's see. There we go. It wasn't coming up on the bottom. Okay, so the presentation is up. So just as a reminder, this survey was open. It was a very short, when we talked about our parent survey, we consider this a pulse survey. We were trying to get it as close to the board meeting as possible, because as we look at COVID-19, both for our parent survey and for our staff survey, it's a lot about how people are feeling, and feelings kind of change as COVID-19 and contagion in our area. So just like our parent survey, we did do a very short survey, pushed it out, communicated a lot to our community, our staff community, but also doing it in a short period of time as a pulse survey. So the window was open, as you can see here, from Wednesday, September 30th through Tuesday, October 6th. About 54% of the district's employees participated in the short questionnaire. This is the second survey, as I mentioned. We did a survey earlier, right before the start of school, and this is the second survey. So it's a little different. We did not repeat the same survey. We did a new survey unique to this time. So you can see here the participation breakdown. We have 67%. I'm sorry, my mask is bothering me. Okay, so you can see here when we look at the survey breakdown from teachers to classroom paraprofessionals, those staff members that are in the classroom with our students versus other staff, it was about a 2/3 split for classroom staff and then 33% for other staff. We also looked, when we looked at our staff, our teaching staff, those teachers and paraprofessionals, we also looked and asked them, are you providing the concurrent instruction? Are you providing one modality of instruction? So you can see there, 86% of the teachers that participated in the survey are providing concurrent instruction. At some point during the day, they're providing both, simultaneously providing remote instruction and in-person instruction. So the first question that we asked our staff was, how comfortable do you feel in your work environment? So you can see here, when you look at this, we have both from the 23% of our staff, so close to 1 out of every 4 members of our staff members say they feel very comfortable. Staff members and students are following our safety protocols. You can also see down here in the bottom corner that almost half of our staff, and this is an important message I think for all of us, is they say, I don't really feel comfortable or uncomfortable. Staff members and students are following safety protocols, but I'm still nervous about COVID-19. And this is something important for us all to recognize, that even when people are wearing masks and following all the protocols, 1 out of every 2 staff members still are nervous about COVID-19. And then you can see here, a 1 out of 3, 29% say they feel uncomfortable. And they do note that staff members and students are not following all the safety protocols, and they're nervous about COVID-19. So the other question, too, when we look at this, you can see a little bit of that same question broken down by classroom staff and non-classroom staff. With the classroom staff, they're neither comfortable or uncomfortable. That 33% of uncomfortable. So when we look at that uncomfortable, I feel uncomfortable, 33% of our classroom staff as compared to 21% of our non-classroom staff. So one of the other questions we asked in our staff survey was, how knowledgeable do you feel about COVID-19 safety procedures the district has in place? And you can see here, somewhat knowledgeable and knowledgeable, only 4% of our staff said they do not feel knowledgeable. But again, good feedback for us as we continue to communicate our COVID-19 protocols to all of our staff members. So this is a really important question that we asked. So this question was only asked to our teachers and classroom paraprofessionals. We asked them, how is learning going? How is instruction and learning going? So when you can see here, remote instruction down here, you can see the difference here. When you look at the right, the 18% here, 18% of our staff say both remote and in-person instruction is going well. 42% of our staff that answered this question say both remote and in-person instruction are struggling, it's challenging. And then 5% say in-person instruction is struggling and remote instruction is going well. And 35% remote instruction is struggling, in-person instruction is going well. So you can remember that the vast majority of our teachers are doing the concurrent instruction, doing simultaneous remote and in-person. And so of those doing the remote and in-person, the in-person, they say, you know, here there's a lesser percent that say in-person is struggling. We're more saying with the concurrent remote instruction. So what resources, if any, do you need more information or training to assist you in your work? And you can see here in our curriculum and instruction team and our workforce development team, they're already working on these two items that you see here, blended learning practices and concurrent instructional practices. They've been doing that. We're very aware that the concurrent instruction is challenging, and our team has been this whole entire week, even before these survey results came in, they've been out in our campuses providing and training to really help our teachers with that simultaneous instruction. But this is really good feedback, has been shared across with all of our teams that are supporting our campuses to understand the resources that are needed. So we did, and in your binder, we have included and provided to you as our board members our open-ended questions. We say feedback is a gift, and our staff gave us a lot of really good feedback that the entire cabinet has been reviewing. You can see it's back in front pages. We've provided you every single response to the open-ended question that was asking what additional resources, what else do you want to say to us? We just asked an open-ended question at the end of the survey. What else do you want to tell us about how things are going? And the big one you can see at the top here is, you know, concurrent instruction is very challenging. You have all of these responses to the open-ended questions to review, but you're definitely going to see that message. We've also been talking a lot at the cabinet level, here in central admin is really, and when we get into the next presentation too, is these extra duties trainings, you know, where possible, can they be reduced? Because there's a lot going on with teaching. And so really, you know, you're going to see a lot of messages. I'm really focused on teaching. Please don't give me additional tasks. And so that's a big message that's coming from our frontline staff. They're asking for more training. They're eager for more training related to blended learning. And our workforce development team is responding in that way. They've also talked, and I know you guys know, there have been challenges with technology, not just here in Spring, but in many school districts, most school districts, related to remote learning. And there are teachers saying, is there a way to have some teachers doing remote while other teachers do in person? And that's a theme that we're not just seeing here in Spring, they're also seeing in other school districts too as well. As districts are challenged with staffing and concurrent instruction, there are questions as how can we maybe have some teachers focus on remote and in person because of those challenges of doing both at the same time. And again, just more information I've tried to pull out. We looked across the patterns so that you could have this high level kind of review of the qualitative data. But again, just more information on deep cleaning. We're going to be starting to provide that to our staff. And then we do have our dashboard. And I know you guys see all the messages that go out related to any confirmed positive at our campus, but we are having our employees say they want even more information. So definitely feedback that we're taking here at the district at cabinet and campus leadership. So that's the staff survey. I don't know if you have any questions about it, but I just do want to reinforce that we are using this information. We wanted to provide it to you in a very transparent way. You have all of the qualitative data, every single response to the open-ended questions there in your binder, but we are using this data, this information, we're reviewing it, we're taking it to heart, and we're making plans to support our staff. Any questions on this one?
I'd just like to thank you for this survey. These open-ended question responses are going to be very, very informative to have
Absolutely.
somebody express exactly what they like or don't like or where they're having problems. This is just wonderful.
Yeah,
Good
and
survey.
I think when you get feedback like this, we say feedback is a gift, but when someone takes the time to write, 2 paragraphs, and most of them are a lot of great recommendations, it's really important that we read through them and we understand the patterns, and we start to take some steps to address some of the things that they're saying. But a lot of them you can see they're thoughtful responses and giving us really good information.
Yeah, I want to echo what Dr. Jensen just said. And this, especially the open-ended feedback, is a really big opportunity to exceed expectations. People so often sort of expect the worst or anticipate the worst. And I think we're doing a good job here of figuring out where the real concerns are. And then you guys are being proactive about, confronting those and making corrections where possible. So thank you for that.
I noticed that in some of the results we see, over 40%, close to half, saying that students are struggling. And what are some of our initial steps that we're taking to address that?
So one of the things we're doing is, I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of work that some kids, as they articulated with me this past week, that they're getting. But also it has to do with teachers and students learning how to learn in a different way. So for example, some kids express that they have difficulty learning online, but they and their parents don't want to come back. And so for some of them, they want more individualized instruction, but have that remotely. That's really difficult when the teacher's in the classroom with kids, then also has a group of kids online as well. And some of the students are fearful to raise their hand or state their question online, because then the whole class can hear them ask the question. So they sit quietly. A lot of kids have indicated that the most difficulty that they're having is in math. Trying to do math remotely versus being in the classroom is difficult. And so Ms. Bradford and her team have been out. I know this week they've been really meeting and talking with teachers, trying to figure out strategies and things that they can do to help. In my conversations with parents, over the past several weeks, it's really been trying to help them understand and normalize their concerns with instruction, but also helping them understand, it has to be when it's safely for their own kids to come back based upon their own desire. But for some of the expectations that they have and wanting that one-on-one individualized touch, that can't happen remotely when you're in a classroom. And so we try to encourage them to come back and talk with us about the safety protocols, but it's also going to be important for us to support them. And so we're trying to play it both ways and look at different strategies that we can do to help.
Great information.
We mentioned the Wi-Fi being an issue. What are we doing to kind of resolve or to work towards resolving that issue?
Yeah, I think some of those issues were resolved on the Wi-Fi. They're asking about Wi-Fi, the technology side.
Yeah, we had some issues a couple of weeks ago with some Wi-Fi. Is that what you're referencing as well? Or,
Well, no, I'm referencing, in the data, that was one of the concerns about the Wi-Fi going down.
yeah, so
during
we
the
had some issues a couple of weeks ago. We had Some of the issues were related to Google Meets itself that was having some issues, even Zoom. We noticed other school districts were having similar issues, but we dug a little bit deeper into our own network, and we did find a couple of issues that our IT department, we even went so far as to bring in consultants to review our entire system for Wi-Fi. They did find a couple of issues with some of our filters that were looping a little bit. One of the things that added to it was so many Chromebooks that we've delivered. We've delivered over 22,000 Chromebooks to students. When those students came back to in person and they brought their Chromebooks, there was a little configuration in the filtering when they came to in person and logged into our network from our facilities that caused a little bit of a loop. And so they were actually running through the content filters twice, which was something that we didn't expect to happen. Thankfully, we were able to fix those problems. And over the past week and a half, we've seen lots better connectivity. We've actually witnessed it here in the building as we're having meetings. The connectivity has been much, much better. So we continue to take a look at it, and those little unforeseen things that pop up, we try to address them as soon as possible. But we definitely know that our teachers and our students are dependent on a good, healthy network. So that's one of the things that we want to keep an eye on going forward.
Thank you.
What happens when it goes down in the classroom?
Don't forget your mic.
What's our protocol when it goes down in the classroom? Teachers sitting there, classroom full of students, no one's computer's working.
So I think it happens on both sides. So we've heard issues where they are working with kids in the classroom and there's a glitch or something blinks like it does at all of our homes, and they stop and they log back in and they get going. Sometimes kids, when it glitches at home, they can't log back in, and so they stay and spin, or sometimes they don't come back in because they can't get back in until they're able to, their system catches up. And so they do what we normally do is they wait, log back in, see if they can get the students back in, and they keep going.
They're not prepared with, I know remotely that's hard, but in the classroom.
In the classroom, with students in the classroom,
Yeah.
it's totally different. So if it goes out and they can still keep working
Right.
with the students inside the classroom. The biggest issue are those students that are remote.
On a remote.
So the students in the classroom, are they working from their Chromebooks?
Both, yes. So and sometimes they're doing activities in their classroom, not using the Chromebooks, but by and large, we see a lot of students that are logged in their Chromebooks in class with the other remote students. So they're interacting with the whole class. We've seen cases where some teachers have two laptops. One of the laptops is facing the kids so they can all see each other online and in the classroom. Then the teacher is interacting with them on a separate laptop.
Okay.
Dr. Watson, can you talk a little bit about the plan for addressing some of the concerns in the open-ended survey?
So much like Ms. Danofield said, we've gone through each one of these. Most of the comments in here are things that we heard from the teachers. One of the things that we found out last week when we were meeting with middle high school teachers, they started talking about a few of the concerns, and then the meeting actually flipped. Other teachers start talking to the other teachers about things that they've done to remediate those issues and saying that we don't have these issues because we've done this. And so the aha that we had is the teachers have the resources in terms of the intellect, the knowledge on how to help each other. Instead of us coming down and saying, go do this or come to this PD or go do that, they want to set up their own PD like they did at the beginning of the year, where they're taking some of the challenges in the data and they're coming up with the solutions and presenting them back out to their peers. And so that's one of the things we're going to be working on is another for teachers by teachers in terms of PD that's specific to their needs based upon their own experiences that they're solving for each other. And so it was amazing. We all sat back, Mark and Dr. Hinterhost and I sat back. They just started talking and started solving each other's problems. And we're like, they have the answers to their problems.
It'll be interesting to see in a few months or in the next 6 weeks, if we're able to do this survey again, where the needle moves to in terms of what solutions we collectively arrive at
Mhm.
to address some of these concerns.
I think one of the biggest things as we talk about concurrent instruction, having looked at so many classes in the district, concurrent instruction is nothing like anything that any of us as educators has ever done. As I told the teachers as I walked through, I consider myself a great teacher. I've never done concurrent instruction, and it's different than just blended learning. And so I think that's a struggle. That's a real struggle that they have. And one of the things I think we're going to really need to continue talking about as we're doing now in cabinet is how long is that going to be able to be sustained? Because teachers are worn out now trying to do both. But remember, we can only do only remote or only in person to the degree that the number of kids in remote and in person stay the same, or no one gets sick. Because if you have some teachers that are only doing in person and they get sick, then there's a huge gap. And we've been doing a lot right now where central office has been going into buildings for a variety of reasons and taking classes for teachers who are not there. So we are looking at and exploring, as you all know, that we have a virtual school. We've had a virtual school for over 10 years. And so we are looking at different things that we can do to really build that up. So if we have students that are remote, they can have a remote teacher. And so those are things that we're planning and thinking about. We do know a lot of schools have really taken it upon themselves to experiment. Certain grade levels are all remote and all in person. Some are doing both. And so we're looking at some of the best practices in those buildings and making recommendations to the campuses.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have one question. I saw the resounding theme in here about the deep cleaning Wednesday. What happened with that?
So that was, I'll let Mark talk about the actual deep cleaning.
Okay.
One of the things, if you remember in our plan, we had that we would close on Wednesdays for deep cleaning. But remember, TEA changed their guidelines for pre-K through 8. You must have the building open every day. So that prevents us from being able to close the building on Wednesdays because that's not allowed for us or we won't receive any funding. They did allow us to implement a hybrid schedule at the high school. And so you all passed that waiver a couple board meetings ago, which still allows us to be able to do that. And so for some of the teachers, it's just re-educating and letting them know that's not something that we just changed and took out of our plan. As we presented last month, we have to respond to the new guidelines of TEA, which does not allow us to close the campus. Today, guidance came out for districts that want to close their campuses on the election day. And TEA said if you want funding, unless you're closed that day like we are, you have to stay open that day. You can't just go remote on election day. And so as we continue to tell everyone, new guidance comes out every Thursday. And so it's just helping people to stay abreast of the new guidance that comes out and letting them know that it's not something we're just changing our mind. We don't want to do it anymore, but we're adhering to the new rules.
Did TEA offer rationale for why you couldn't do
Why
remote
what?
on election day?
I can't hear you.
Did they offer a rationale for that?
No, not that I know.
That's a bit frustrating, and I know, like that. This is sort of the thing that's starting to become sort of an irritant about the way they do things. If that's the guidance that we receive, that's great. I think we are entitled to an explanation for why they're doing things the way they're doing. And so that irritates me that, okay, well, why not? What difference does that make?
Yeah, they just indicated that it's the parent's choice. If a parent chooses to have their kid there 5 days a week, schools must be open.
Thank you, Ms. Dawn Oakfield. I really enjoy looking at the survey presentation here and as to how you have it laid out. But what I enjoy most about this presentation and this binder is that you took the time to put in all of the teachers' remarks. The good, the bad, the ugly is all in the back of this binder that we can take time to read. So you've been very transparent with us in sharing the results of this survey. And it's here in black and white for us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And just as a reminder, we did do the cut. The survey was open. Again, we're trying to do these pulse surveys as close to our board meetings as possible. So there definitely are plans to use this data. We cut the data on Tuesday. This presentation, the data presentation, and everything you see in your binder was actually printed like at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the data is super fresh data. It's not stale data, and we do have plans to use the data. And I know for our cabinet members, the qualitative piece was like, you guys have double-sided, it's over 100 pages. I sent them and I said, you probably don't want to print this, but you need to start to review it. So everybody does have the data, and we are going through the data. And I changed my mask. I was trying to wear a designer cute mask, and I have one that's much more comfortable now. I apologize that I was muffled before. I was trying to look cute on camera and it did not work.
Thank you, thank you. And if you will please continue with your next item.
Absolutely. The next item is your second binder, and this has a lot of data in it as well. I'm going to talk a little bit before I get started and pull up my presentation as panelists that are here and available. So as we walk through this data, we're presenting the overview of our district and campus planning process. You guys know every year we come and we talk with you about our CIPs, our campus improvement plans. So we're going to present the overview today, and then Mr. Miranda and some of our principals are going to be prepared to actually go through their CIPs, the details with you. But we really wanted to walk through the process that we went through with our schools this year. And then we also wanted to give you data to go a deeper dive so that you can review that data before Tuesday's meeting. And I know that Mr. Miranda, he has 3 principals set up to present on Tuesday, but as you're looking through the data too, and there is some campus data here in your binder too as well, we're welcome to also say, I'd like to have this principal talk through their CIP on Tuesday. So in your binder, your presentation is in the front left pocket, and we're going to start to walk through that in a second. But we've actually provided you the templates that we used with our campuses this year, and that's in the front part. And then you can see all the data too. That we're only going to talk through the BOY, the STAR BOY this evening, but all the other data is there for you. And Dr. Jennifer Cobb, our Assistant Superintendent of Research and Student Success, is here with us tonight. She is on the Zoom call, and she can answer any questions this evening, but also as you walk through your data, she can answer questions on Tuesday. We also have Don Oliver, our Executive Director of School Improvement, on the line, and they're very involved in this process. And I asked them to please jump in if I don't get something right in their presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. There we go. There we go. So I want to start on this first slide. So, you know, when we were looking at our staff data, you know, this is a stressful year for everyone, our campus leaders, and definitely for our frontline teachers and paraprofessionals. So as we looked at our campus improvement process this year, you can see there's a little line up there. We wanted it to be something straightforward, streamlined, but we definitely wanted it to also be meaningful. So we took a different approach to our campus improvement process this year, and I'm going to walk you through it because that was really important for us. We needed to have district improvement goals for the district. We needed to have our campuses develop their campus improvement goals, but we also wanted to be a straightforward process for our principals, but yet really meaningful, and to stay focused on growth like we have for many years. So we're going to talk through some data. We're going to talk through the process. I'm going to talk to you about the district's plans for this year, improvement plans, and then the campus plans. So some data, and I want to kick off. I know that you guys have been looking, and I know you look at a lot of research, but we did bring some information, and I pulled 2 different pieces, because as we look at our data, and we're going to start with that STAR BOY that we administered here in the district, it's really important. We're hearing a lot about this COVID slide. So this is coming from a McKinsey and Company study that was called COVID-19 and Student Learning in the United States, the Hurt That Could Last a Lifetime. And one of the items that they were talking about, so if you look at these different scenarios, we're actually in scenario 1 because we came back in the fall. This was published in June. But it was a forecast for the learning loss, the potential learning loss, if, in classroom instruction, that in-person in classroom instruction didn't resume. And so the 3 scenarios, and by fall, by January, or didn't resume at all this year. And there is a little note at the bottom, and that's important. So as we support our campuses too, we do have families that are choosing remote instruction. They're choosing remote instruction for their family. So how can, I know our curriculum and instruction team, our workforce development team, in supporting our campus to make that as rigorous and as rich as possible. So that can vary, remote instruction can vary, but when there are different scenarios, McKinsey and study, they're saying even best coming back in the fall, there's a 3-month, learning loss for students with COVID-19. And then they talk about the number of dropouts, and that on the right hand is thousands that they're predicting for the US. This has actually been used by the TEA recently, and several presentations that they're doing. But this one also looks at, so you have COVID slide, but the difference potentially between high income and low income areas, and looking at the learning loss or the difference, in the COVID slide between high income and low income areas. And again, this has been, just shared widely by the TEA. So it's something important as we're all thinking about campus improvement plans, district improvement plans, despite the pandemic, despite all the challenges, how do we stay focused on growing our students and growing them where they're at when they came back to us this school year. So the first thing I'm going to do in the data section is walk you through our STAR BOY, our beginning of the year assessment. Is the first time it was offered by the TEA. We are using it as a diagnostic tool. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're using it here in our CIP process. But we're also using it as, this kind of blueprint or map for how we can grow our students as we head towards the end of the year STAR. So just a little graphic here as we look, we're going to go through the BOY STAR. And just as a reminder, for the STAR tested, we have the students did not meet grade level, approaches grade level, meets grade level, and masters grade level. So in administering the BOY, so we're giving our 3rd grade students this STAR BOY that's testing them on what they need to know by the end of 3rd grade, right? So if you see my little runner down here, most of our students, it's the beginning of 3rd grade, and this BOY is testing them on what they need to know by the end of the year. So for a lot of students, they're starting this kind of race for what they need to know, most of our students are going to kind of fall into that did not meet grade level. But we do have students, when we go through the data, you're going to see approaches grade level, meets grade level, and master's grade level. You're going to see we put a little dotted line there between approaches and meets grade level, because if you think about where we want to get our kids by the end of the year, we really want them on meets grade level, that they have the skills necessary to go on to the next grade. And sometimes we often talk about our data, because in TAPER, we report all the kids that get to approaches, meets, or masters, right? And they kind of group, and you get a number for all those kids. But if your approaches, you haven't met the standard for that grade level, so that means that you're ready to go on to the next grade level. So we kind of put that little finish line that we're focused on right there between approaches and meets grade level. When we look at the data, though, I also color-coded it. So if we're looking at the end of the year, so this changes, and if you look at the little runners here, a little depiction, is that, so the BOY, it's normal, it's expected that, we're going to have more of our students kind of at that did not meet grade level, because they haven't been provided the instruction that they need to have that knowledge and skills by the end of the year. But by the end of the year, we really want the majority of our students to be crossing that line and really having and meeting the standard and having the skills they need to go on to the next year. So when we look at our data, I'm going to keep reminding that we're looking at BOY, So third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders being tested at the beginning of the year. So what they need to know by the end of the year. But what's important about this is that for the CIPs, setting goals with our campuses, here's where your kids were at the beginning of the year, and setting some goals for where we want to get them at the end of the year. So elementary, we brought this high level for you, and we wanted it to be all the data behind this, and a deeper dive is in your binder. But we also wanted to look at this. So across our elementary campuses, for all of the grades that are tested for reading, you can see here the 6,600 students were tested. So out of that, 70% of them are the did not meet grade level, and then 20% at approaches grade level, 6% at meets grade level, and 3% at master's grade level. So that if you look at that 3% of our students at the very beginning of third grade, and I'll use that example again, basically tested with mastery level for third grade, right? And 6% or 419 students were at the meets grade level. Basically, that STAR exam, they met all the expectations for the STAR exam for the third grade. They're at the beginning of the third grade year for the end of the year, okay? And you can see the math, writing, and science here for elementary, okay?
Mr. Nuffield,
Yes.
do those students that already meet in their masters need to retake the STAR in the spring?
They do need to continue taking
Yes,
it.
they will.
Yes.
Because even in one of the things as we look here, and I know Dr. Cobb is a much better explainer of this, but when we look at the masters here, even the kids that are masters, we're trying to grow them. We're trying to grow them, even though they're only, if they're taking the third grade, you can't get higher than masters, but you're still trying to grow them throughout the year, but their score would still be masters. To your question, would still be masters, but we're still trying to grow them. And some of the students could be here at the beginning. If you see at the kind of beginning of masters, they basically kind of just got a little bit into masters, and then some are, far into masters. So there's a range in each of these.
Trustee Adams, just to answer your question a little bit more, the BOY STAR was administered by the district, and so it doesn't count as a STAR exam for TEA. This is all locally controlled. It was created by TEA, and the analysis is done because it's all online by TEA, but it's not an official exam. But it's the best thing that we have available to us that is STAR-like and directly from TEA.
Is there any comparison available for BOY last year?
There is no comparison for BOY. It's the first time that the TEA has administered it. When we were looking at this data, we know that you like comparisons. We looked about every other, but we didn't want to compare something that wasn't apples to apples or even close. Mm-hmm. So we definitely, looked at how we could compare it to other data, but we do want to also take this BOY as a diagnostic tool, as a baseline for this year. And that's kind of, why I wanted to talk a little bit about the COVID slide, but this gives our teachers, our campuses a look at the beginning of the year, but there wasn't something easily to compare it to.
That's why I asked what tool we were using before, because I was surprised it was STAR, because we hadn't done it
In
before.
previous years, we used
But then
math.
Yes, in
but then
previous
how
years.
do we know,
Go ahead.
but then how do we know that we had a slide that was bigger or not because of COVID, if we don't have a comparison?
And I think that's the difficult part that districts are grappling with. We previously have used MAP, and MAP is a test that we give online. But when you have 50 or 60% of your kids taking it at home and with no computers, and now we have computers, it's invalid. And so we can't give a test that's supposed to be given in the classroom to the students at home who take it with their parents. And so we did not give the MAP test this year. It would have been too much. For the primary, actually for the third through eighth grade, for the amount of time that it takes for teachers to proctor each individual student and walk around. And if 80% of their kids are at home, it's an invalid test.
Correct. But with MAP, did we see these type of percentages at the beginning of the year?
Dr. Cobb can talk a little bit more. It measures something totally different.
it's kind of hard to,
Yeah, it's not the same
struggling with how
test.
do we know how impacted we were?
Well, I think as we go through this and look at middle school and high school in particular, you can see the impact.
Okay.
When we started looking at this the other day and we were thinking about even comparing it to a STAR exam, so we know there was no STAR exam in the spring, but then you go back to a different cohort, the last time that there was 18, 19.
Okay.
And then that's so far back as well because of the time.
Okay. And so can we have diagnostic tools?
And Dr. Cobb, did you want to add anything? I know that we looked so many different ways at comparing. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
The only thing I would add is that MAP is a skills-based test, so it's actually looking at skills not necessarily directly aligned to STAR. However, there is a crosswalk that does show you the alignment to STAR, and then it also has a STAR predictive score. So that is something that we looked at in years prior with MAP. However, we didn't have the impact of really a COVID slide, but you also, with MAP, what makes the prediction more accurate is the more measures you have. So really, we didn't reflect on that, not at BOY, but at MOY. So when you had 2 measures of performance for those kids and previous years' measures of performance of that same individual child, you had a better trajectory to know how they would do in STAR. So it wasn't STAR to STAR, as this is very closely aligned, if not almost precisely, where MAP was more of the, we have determined that they know these readiness skills on MAP and we can forecast on STAR because of it.
I'm going to move on to the middle school. So this is the middle school beginning of the year results. Again, in your binder, you can see here the did not meets. If you think back on that little runner, the did not meets approaches the meets and then the masters. But there is in your binder information, detailed information on this data. There's by campus too as well for you to review.
I ask a question about the writing. It looks like that's a rather successful program. The higher percentages of approaches and meets. Is that an easy test?
So I think that's the growth and the gap that we're talking about. So writing has been an area, as you just mentioned, that we've struggled in previous years. And so as you begin to look at middle school, and that's why I said middle school, is what this shows us is we have students that are scoring at a higher level than in the past in previous STAR exams. If we're looking at comparing them there, they're scoring, more of them have more aptitude to pass the test as it relates to this exam than what we've shown in the past. And so I don't think it's necessarily easier. I think as students have transferred in, maybe our 5th graders coming into the middle school were stronger. And then maybe the work that was happening in middle schools with the other grade levels has helped out. Dr. Cobb, you want to add anything onto that as well?
Yes, sorry. With the writing, this is only measuring the mechanical components. It does not have the essay in it or any writing samples that normally is present in the spring STAR. So this would be like, find the grammatical error, find the misspelling. It's the mechanics of writing rather than the actual writing of scoring of an essay.
When were these? When was this administered?
Very recently. Can you give the window, Dr. Cobb?
Offhand, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe it was after Labor Day until October 2nd.
The results have just been provided to our campuses in the past week. So as they're part of the CIP process, we're all digesting this information too as well. So the next slide I'll move on to is the high school STAR beginning of the year by the English, Algebra, Biology, and US History. You can see here. And then I'm going to move on to some of the work that we're doing as we prepare for the CIP. So again, this beginning of the year, this BOY STAR that we were able to provide our campuses this year. There were 2 campuses that didn't participate. Wanchee at the high school level, they're doing their own assessments, and then Clark too, because of the grade levels there. So primary. So those are the only 2 campuses. The other campuses all administered this BOY STAR.
I have another question, and it's about algebra. It's been my understanding that the more mathematically advanced students take algebra in 8th grade or earlier, and that the kids who might be struggling with math are taken as a freshman in high school. So we don't have algebra for the middle school, right? Is that included here?
It's
How,
included.
how does it break out?
It's included in the middle school data. You'll see it there.
Here in the math section in the middle school.
So it's just included as math.
I'll find the exact page and I'll text it to Tiffany of where you can locate that. I didn't realize we're pausing the presentation, but it's on page 26 of 37. You can see that in the breakdown of the campuses where it says Algebra 1, you will see middle schools and the high schools present in that data analysis.
So that's a little confusing to me now that you say that, Dr. Cobb.
Let me see.
So I have a 9th grader at Westfield, and she's doing Algebra 1. She was in AP Algebra in 8th grade at Robertson.
So at the bottom of the page, you'll see the high schools. So the high school Algebra 1 data is present there. And then you have the middle school 8th grade Algebra 1 above that.
Dr. Cobb, can you say that one more time? Because I think you broke off. We were frozen for a little while.
Okay, sure. So on page 26 of 37, which in your binder is almost to the end of the BOY map results, it's a green titled chart. You'll have it by campus, and it's actually split up by the different assistant superintendents, but you will see the Algebra 1 results for middle school. And then at the bottom, you'll see the Algebra 1 results for the high schools. So both are reported, they're just separated out.
Does that answer the question? Jennifer, so are they included in the middle school math on the presentation?
Yes, they're included in that presentation as well. It's grouped together.
Grouped together by school level?
Yes, and on the presentation here for the middle school math, that does include Algebra 1 for 8th grade.
Is there any additional questions on the middle school?
I need to ask Dr. Cobb something offline.
Okay.
I know it's a lot of data in the binder. And again, Dr. Cobb will be here on Tuesday. She can also address any questions. And if you send them to us, we can come prepared to respond to those on Tuesday's meeting too, if that works.
I'm still struggling with how to apply it.
How to apply it?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we're looking at as you applied, I think Tiffany's going to kind of get into it in her presentation, or how we set goals for that. Right now, we're just showing you the data.
Gotcha.
Then we're going to show how we apply it and set the goals for next year.
Good transition there. I'm going to actually, we do have data. We broke it out for you, high level for this presentation by our sub-pops. With our focus on equity, you know, we always look at our data by sub-pops too as well, but I have broken it out here too as well for you based on our sub-pops. And so you can see here with this BOY data, and we're going to get into the next steps because this BOY data was really important for our CIP process. And that's where I'm going to get to in a second. And the data is all here. And I know you guys have a lot of questions, but we are looking at it and our campuses are looking at it also by sub-pops. So you can see there is the achievement, the gap that we're seeing here at the reading, and I'm only providing here in the presentation reading and math, but you have this data by subpopulation for all of the tested content areas, but you can see there is the gap, the 12 percentage point gap between African American and white, and you can see there the 9 percentage point between Hispanic and white of all the grade levels that are tested in reading, that gap, and then for the math as two as well, that gap. So again, we're looking at the data, our campuses are looking at this data as part of their CIP's process. I've also broken it down. I took 2 slides to do this. This is reading by some of our other sub-pops. And Dr. Cobb and her team, if you look at the bottom here, we have also included this BOY data for you. And we have provided it for our campuses with that safety first in-person learning. So the students that are coming to our campuses for in-person instruction, how they did on the BOY data versus the empowered learning at home. We have started, again, this is a fresh cut of data, and Dr. Cobb's team has already started to analyze the difference that you're seeing there, 10 percentage point difference. Our empowered learning at home scoring better on our beginning of the year assessment. And so we are looking at that. It looks like some of the lift may have come from elementary. It may have been some parents assisting with the beginning of the year assessment, but we're not quite sure. We are looking deeper at that data too as well. And math is there provided in the presentation. But again, this data here, you can look at it. It's provided in your binder by every tested area, that breakdown by subpopulations for you too as well. And again, Dr. Cobb would be happy to answer any questions that you have tonight or on Tuesday. So this is where we start to get into how we use the BOY as a baseline, as a diagnostic tool to understand when our students came back to us, where they were at. So if we're trying to really help them grow with quality instruction this year, the BOY gives us, at least it gives us that look, that baseline for where they're at right now, so that we can work and our curriculum and instruction team can really work on growing with quality instructions. Our teachers, our campus leaders can all do this work to grow the students by the end of the year. So that's where a little shift here so that we can explain how we're using it for our CIPs and setting some goals, and our campuses setting goals, not using data from a year and a half ago, the last time end of year STAR was administered, but using data that shows where our students are at right now at the beginning of the year with the last spring closure, from COVID-19. So I've prepared 2 scenarios here for you. So for all of our campuses, they can use this data in this way. So if you look, that at the top is that BOY data. And I'm just doing this one scenario, but we're working with our campuses to look at this. They can do this for any core content area or in any grade level too as well. So taking that beginning of the year data, what we just saw how our students did on the BOY. And so making a goal, if you were to grow most of your students, so on average you were to grow most of your students 1 testing or achievement level, meaning that you're taking the students that did not meet grades level, and again, the students, it's a range there, but taking them and growing them. So if you look there, we have some students that maybe we're not going to be able to, with instruction, or they were really low on the did not meets, but if we do, that the majority of those students, we're going to grow them 1 achievement level. and this is scenario one, where this is a conservative scenario, and we're going to do a more aggressive scenario. But you took the approaches kids and you grew them to the meets. Do you guys see that we're taking the approaches kids and growing them to the meets? And then the meets grade level, you're growing them to the master's grade level with the instruction this year. And so with the CIPs, this is partial with the goal setting that we're working on with the CIPs, and school leadership has been working for our campuses to set some goals using their beginning of the year data. And one of the items, and you heard me mention that little dotted line, when we look at our CIPs and you look at the templates that we developed for our CIPs, a big part is an emphasis on getting kids to the meets grade level. So we've asked our campuses in the core content areas to set a goal on from the BOY, from where that snapshot we saw kids were at coming back to us after last spring's closure, where they're at the beginning of this year, to set a goal for a percentage point increase in the meets level, because it's really important to get the kids across that line, because that means they're ready for the next grade level. So that's some of the goal setting for the CIPs.
Is that for the mid-year exam?
This is for the end of year, setting the goal for the end of the year. Okay. So if you look here, this is a little bit more of an aggressive scenario. There's lots of arrows and lots of boxes here, but it helps illustrate with our campuses how they can use the beginning of the year information. So in this scenario, you are growing your student learning on average 1 to 2 STAR testing levels per student. So some of the students you're going to grow, so if you look at that 70% that did not meet, if you're growing a portion of them 1 testing or achievement level, coming down here to the approaches, but some of those students with quality instruction, they're going to grow 2 testing levels, and they're going to get all the way to the meets grade level, right? And then when you look at the meets grade level, is growing those students to masters. So really is taking a scenario where some of your students, you're gonna, with quality instruction, you're gonna grow them 1 testing or achievement level, but other students, and you know, with the great instruction our teachers provide, growing those students 2 testing or achievement levels. And if you look here, the meets grade level, that would be a 29 percentage point increase on the meets. So when we look at our CIPs, challenging our campuses to look at in this very unique year is really being focused on these core content areas, but setting a goal from the BOY, not from data that is, you know, a year and a half old, but setting goals from the BOY for what they can grow that meets level at. Does that make sense with the BOY a little bit, why we wanted to use this and present this data?
I like that this is our students who are in our classes this year, and it's our current data. I assume TEA gives us those categories that did not meet, approaches, and so on. And so a student who barely gets into meets grade level gets much more of a punch for our scoring as a district than somebody who's at the very top of approaches grade levels, and even though their scores may be very little different.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I know we have some students who enter school very, very, shall I say, they don't know the skills that most kids know going into either preschool or kindergarten, and that they make tremendous progress in school, but they're still at the do not meet grade level. So I just brainstorming thing here. I don't want to give anything more to Dr. Cobb. She's marvelous with all the stuff she's doing here. But I know that Winfred, you have said this many times, that you really like to see the changes in the scores and the growth of the kids. And I don't think with these 4 categories that are so broad that TEA is using is always what we need to see. Because I think that teachers are working very, very hard in getting kids to really have a lot of growth, but they're not meeting grade level yet.
I was gonna say the same things. Dr. Jensen picked up on something that in the students that did not meet grade level, there's probably some percentage of those kids who didn't meet grade level in the grade before or on the assessment before.
That's right.
And so lumping all those kids together as if they're all starting at the same starting point and should just make one grade level of growth in order to meet standards that's not a really complete picture.
Right, and I think one of the things to think about is if you all remember in February of last year, we had this exact same conversation and Dr. Cobb came and brought the data to you all in categories. And that was when you all were able to see that some kids started so far behind. It was, matter of fact, we were talking about reading. And we saw that some teachers grew kids 3 or 4 years in half of a year. And so we were able to show you that at our MOY. And so this is the BOI. As teachers work with kids now until we come back and give you some more benchmark or interim assessment data at the MOI, we're going to be able to show you the growth that kids made because as Ms. Dana Oldfield said, these 4 categories have bands in them. And there are some kids at the lower end of did not meet to the middle to the higher end. And we're going to be able to come back and probably Dr. Cobb and her team can break that data down. So when we show you this data the next time after they've received instruction, because remember the data that you're looking at now, there's been no instruction.
Right.
This is just where they are coming back in for the test they're going to take at the end of the year. Then we add the treatment, which is the instruction that they get every day, and we'll be able to show you the growth that the kids are making throughout because our goal by showing you the arrows is where we're wanting the kids to get to by the end of the year.
So my concern, so I understand that, you make a very good point. My concern is when you show, as I recall it, when you showed that to us last year, it was using the map testing instrument, which had a way of delineating those distinctions between students at different levels. And I don't see that here, and I don't anticipate that I would see it in a middle of the year assessment if TEA is administering some sort of MOY star.
Right, so
Because
MAP didn't have that either because you all requested that Jennifer's team went back and created that to show that growth.
Okay.
Because we had the same conversation as, we're just saying
That's
these
kinda
kids
what I
as
was looking
needs,
for.
did not meet and passed. And so we broke those categories down to show you those bands. And so we can do the same with this data.
Okay.
So, and I know too, and as I'm presenting this as one of the tools or levers, because also too, to go back to the CIP process, we were really trying to streamline it for our campuses. We do think that setting this, using the BOY, right? It's a tool, but I know Dr. Cobb and Kachara Bradford, there's lots of ways that they're checking in that students are growing throughout the year. This is not just a BOY and an EOY star with these 4 categories. And the wonderful work that they're doing with our teachers to measure progress throughout the year and those touch points that are not necessarily 100% star focused, but to measure growth. And I don't know if Kachara Bradford or Jennifer, Dr. Cobb want to jump in on that. This is just one tool that we're using as part of our way of looking to ensure growth.
The only other thing I wanted to add as we begin to align our thoughts on this is when we start looking, right now we're looking at the STAR, but there's the pre-K through 2nd grade data as well. As we're looking at our pre-K, K and 1 data, it's good to look at those bands, but at the end of the day, the only way we're going to close the gap is to make sure that if you come into kindergarten, by the end of kindergarten, everyone is ready for 1st grade.
That's right.
And so we got to begin to set those standards because it hurts when we get in 3rd grade and we know kids have come in low and they've made a little growth, but that gap gets wider and wider as they get to 12th grade. And so what we're saying is we understand that, we know that, but we're setting an expectation that they get at least 1 category or 1 year's growth to keep them on grade level.
I'd like to address the question to
So I think-
Dr. Cobb.
Go ahead.
The previous 2 pages, you might want to look at some of your data on the BOI results by subpopulations for reading and math.
Okay.
There's something that doesn't look right. The did not pass percentages are 64 and then passed is 34 for the reading. The math is did not pass 73 and then did pass is 27. But if you look at the percentages below, they're all identical. You see what I'm saying? Look under the did not pass for reading and did not pass for math.
Which subject are you looking at?
Okay, all of them. Look at, just scan down at 69, 61, 88, 64, 72, 61, 71, 61. Now look over at math. 69, 61, 88. You see how they're the same?
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to catch up with you. I'll be there as soon as I can.
I'm lost too.
All right.
I see what she's talking about.
I'm looking at reading.
What is what's
Did not pass. And I'm looking at the percentages of the different subpopulations. It goes 69, 61, 88, 64, 72, 61, 71, 61. Now go over to math. I just did reading. And look, it's 69, 61, 88, 64, 72, 61, 71, 61, identical. I think that somebody accidentally put in the wrong percentages there.
Okay. I will go back and check, and we'll definitely have that fixed for Tuesday.
Dr. Cobb, you see what I'm showing you?
No, unfortunately not. I'm not turning the page fast enough. I don't think I have the same order as you do. What is the title of the top of your page? That would help a lot.
Star, beginning of year, results by subpopulations. And the subject area is reading. And then star, beginning of year, results by subpopulations. The subject area is math.
Yeah, the ends aren't right for that either.
It says 64% at the top of the first one and 73% on the
That's
second
fine.
one. But
They're different. But then
the
you look underneath,
percentages
they're
are
all
identical.
identical. So that's usually a red flag to me.
Right. Yes. I'm not saying that I definitely know you know how to read the data. I'm just not finding what you're finding. But that doesn't mean I'm just probably not flipping to the right page.
I don't know. I can hold this up. It's back 2 pages.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
go back to reading. Okay, now, under do not pass, it's 64% all together, but then it goes 69, 61, 88, 64, 72, 61, etc. Now
Yeah.
go over to math.
Because you're reading it by the row. So it's 69 plus 31 and 61 plus 30. So
Right.
That's,
I'm not reading a row, I'm going down column.
no, so the way we analyzed it was the row. So in this case, so let's take economically disadvantaged. 6,730 is 69% of that 9,738. And then the 3,000.
Now go to math. Go to the math
to the
page
next
now.
slide. Oh, okay.
You see how the percentages, whoops.
You went to
You're
Math.
looking at the reading and the math percentages are exactly the same.
exactly
So you're
the
saying
same.
that's not possible.
are highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely, and so there
Yep.
is the possibility, this is a screenshot of the data here to get it in the nice presentation. So perhaps this screenshot, the bottom part is not math, it's reading again. We'll get that corrected.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was looking at the binder, not the presentation.
Yeah, Jennifer was looking at the binder, the information in the binder, if this is a
Okay.
screenshot issue, the information in the binder should be correct. So we can actually look at that in the binder and see here.
Okay, what page is that in the binder?
There's some things in data that really
Yeah, I
make me
think
wince, and
the
I have to bring
the
them up.
reading is correct, the math is incorrect, and that's
Okay.
on me. I took the screenshot and was trying to make it look nice in this presentation. So that's on me that it is a screenshot, but the data in the binder should be accurate.
And it's not exactly the same percentages when you do the calculations. I think the rounding is just making them all equal to 61%.
Ms. Westbrooks, I don't think so. They even have the numbers of the populations the same.
Yeah. It's
And they don't have the same number of students tested at the top.
Okay.
it's what Tiffany
So
said.
it's a problem where it's been duplicated from the other one.
If you look at that page within your binder, it is correct.
What's the page number in the binder?
Unfortunately, it's one of two, but it's the second yellow section from the BOY Star tab. It's called Spring ISD Fall 2020 BOY Star Results by Subject Analysis.
You just copied over wrong.
Yeah, okay.
I think what I was struggling with is we are using the BOY data to set the campus improvement goals for this year. And I think as a body, we're struggling with comparisons and you know, how we typically see the data, but we're not there yet.
It's not just that we're not there yet. As part of that is, so at the beginning of the year when these assessments came out, we had the option, for example, if you were in 4th grade this year, to give the 3rd grade test. And then that would have shown what they knew or didn't know by the end of
Last year.
but that wouldn't help them for really understanding where they are for this year. And so the principals chose that they wanted to give this year's test because this is where they're working on to close any gaps and get them ready.
Okay.
Because the other data would have been, well, what do we do? Go back and teach them all the other things. And so we gave them this year's test for the end of the year versus giving last year's test.
Because I think in my mind, I'm looking, so my 3rd grade readers were here last year and they were at X% in this area, and we knew we needed to grow them to the next percent, but we can't compare that.
Correct.
It's a philosophical and pedagogical question, because when you administer the 4th grade STAR test to beginning 4th graders, you are by definition assessing them for TEKS they may not have had yet.
Right.
Correct.
And so, like, I get doing that as sort of a formative assessment that
Right.
informs going forward. It just,
There's no comparison.
I might have made a different choice is all I'm saying.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind is, so we do have the opportunity to give the MOY MAP test. It's extremely difficult to do that with kids at home, as I said earlier. However, we gave the last test we gave before COVID, and we showed you all the results in February, was the MOY. So if we were able to give the MOY, even if we give it to the in-person kids, now based upon the feedback from the teachers, that would be just stressed out doing that. We could then compare it to last year's MOY to this year's MOY. That would be given the MAP test again. Mark?
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that exact thing, that was the first thing that I was thinking of. We didn't have an EOY last year to be able to go back to because of obviously the situation we're in. So we had to make a decision on whether, and I'm just basically restating what Dr. Watson said. We either go back to last year's MOY, which now at this point is very old data for us, and especially because we've been talking about COVID slide and summer slide and all the different things. So the principals were really adamant. We don't want to know what our kids were like at MOY last year. We want to know where they are today, starting this school year today. Now, obviously, we're giving them a formative assessment that's not something that they've learned yet, right, for this coming year. But this gives us a very good understanding of where they are and how much they need to grow this year so that they're prepared at the end of the year for the EOY exam. We see this data as very much glass half full, because you could almost make an assumption that we shouldn't have anybody in approaches, meets, or masters, because exactly what you said earlier, they haven't been taught these TEKS yet. So when we saw some of the numbers that we did see, at first glance, when you see big numbers in the orange, you think automatically, well, that's not good. But when you realize they haven't been taught these TEKS, and you see the numbers in the gray and the greens, we get a little excited. So we start to dive into the numbers, just like you have been asking. We're not looking at these numbers class by class, campus by campus. We're looking at these numbers at the campus level, student by student. Because we have to know each student, where they are, where they land in each category, and how much we need to grow them individually. So in looking at these student by student numbers that you've all been asking about, We're going to be able to do that, and we're going to know exactly how much growth we need to get from each student. So we are extremely excited that, like, for example, one of the things, and we didn't see the sub pop, but we were looking at masters, and you have 3% on the screen above you have 3% in masters. One of the questions we asked was, well, are all those masters our GT students? Just as an example, because you would kind of think that maybe the 3%, they're 3% because they're GT, right? So we looked up our GT students, and we found out that that 3% doesn't only include GT students. So there are students that haven't been identified GT and I'm just looking at the one that's on the screen, but we have this in every category. There are students that haven't been identified GT that made masters already. So can you imagine? So we have a huge growth opportunity for getting all the rest of our GT students to masters. And that should be something that's very doable. So when I've been talking to the assistant soups and the principals, I have GT students that are sitting in meets, and maybe even some of them sitting in approaches. I know I can get those students to masters. And so we're going to have targeted plans in advanced academics and do whatever we need to do to get them to masters. Now, all of a sudden, that 3% goes up, and that's what Tiffany is showing. That 3% goes up by 9% and more and more and more, because we have these great opportunities to grow from here. And so having this baseline data for where we need to be by the end of the year is really extremely helpful for our principals to say, this is what I need to grow, as opposed to going back to the MOI and figuring out where they were last year for last year's grade. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
And so now my question is so I really appreciated that MAP offered all these tools, and one of them was like sort of a prescription for each child.
Mhm.
You know, areas for growth, which TEKs they were weak in, so on and so forth. So we will have that mechanism in place for this as well, is what I'm.
Yeah, so one of the things here, and it was mentioned, this is a STAR-aligned screener that we were able to do this year, hadn't been previously available. MAP's not actually a recommended TEA screener this year.
Okay.
And so that was another reason why we said, let's do the STAR-aligned screener, because then we'll know it's apples to apples that we're looking at. And
So we were converting before.
exactly.
Right.
Right.
Okay. I'm good.
So
Thank you.
how does this help us identify where we need additional intervention? But all of them, or?
So, as I said earlier, they're in bands, and the did not
Yeah.
approaches, they're in different bands. So the kids that are at the lower end of that band need additional support, tutorials, extra teaching.
By the bands,
Yeah, right.
okay.
I think if we go into the CIP, and maybe I did the order incorrectly in the presentation, I think some of the way we're using the BOI as a tool will become, how the campuses are going to use it. And you're going to see more of that on Tuesday as well. So if we go in here, again, the two scenarios here is just, again, as a way of showing and helping our campuses understand and setting goals. So to the comment that Mr. Miranda was mentioning, here, behind this movement of trying to grow students 1 to 2 testing our achievement levels is a lot of work at our campuses. It's focused on the individual students. So the data we're presenting is at the district level, and the campuses are getting their campus level, and they're getting their student level data. But two is in this very challenging year, and as we get into the CIPs, is having this baseline from the campuses to work, having from our teachers to work from this baseline forward. And so these scenarios we're also sharing with our campuses, and it's just a way, it's one tool in our toolbox, but it's a way to, coming back from our closure in the spring, to start from a baseline and then work towards growth. And so this is, we think that laying this out and helping our campuses see and setting some goals, but to the students that go across each of these ranges, there needs to be a plan for each of those students, where they sit in those ranges. And when we look at our CIPs here, I'm going to go into, so you have 3 templates in your binder. They're basically the same, and we wanted to keep this consistent, again, to be very straightforward with our principals too, and as our assistant soups support them, but again, to be meaningful work this year. So for our elementary, our middle schools and high schools, we're going to see, and we're going to talk with you about, we've asked them to set 2 core instructional strategies, per core content area. So 2 instructional strategies per core content areas, and to set some goals using their BOY as a baseline for setting those goals. And in the elementaries, we do have the early childhood strategies and goals in there as well. And at the high schools, we have that CCMR, that college, career, and military readiness. We've asked for them to set a couple of goals there as well. And then across all of our CIPs this year, often our campuses, they have this component, but we, again, to keep it streamlined for our campuses, we're asking them to set 2, let me go back. 2 strategies related to social emotional and 2 per parent engagement across all of our campuses in support of our students and families during the pandemic. So again, straightforward, streamlined. If you look at the templates for our campuses versus having this huge document is being really focused on these instructional strategies and setting some goals with the BOY data. Really for our campuses, it's 5 workbook pages, and we worked really hard to make these fillable, to make these with a lot of drop downs for them to fill it in, because we really wanted our campuses to spend more time reflecting on things that they, in the work that they, and with their BOY and looking at that data, and then setting some goals for growth this year, despite the pandemic. Yes, Dr. Jensen.
Are you telling me that you're cutting down on the paperwork?
We are cutting down on the paperwork. Yes.
Hallelujah.
We're cutting down on the paperwork. So for our campuses, it was 5 to 6 if they have a couple of additional pages on the funding details, but 5 to 6 workbook pages. We tried to make them as easy to fill in as possible. And so I'm going to walk you through right now. We're going to focus a little bit because we did set some district strategies and goals in here that relate, because we always want to have that district improvement plan that kind of sets the umbrella that are a cascade down to our campus improvement plans. And so I'm going to start with the districts. So in this document, you're going to see the districts, plans, and goals, what we're focused on this year. And the big part is we're focused on supporting our campuses, having that oversight at our campuses, but also really, really strong on the support. So from the districts, we're going to be really working with our campuses to ensure that they are implementing 2 instructional strategies, 2 targeted campus level. They're choosing those instructional strategies, and you're going to see those in the CIPs. You're going to hear about them on Tuesday, per core content area. And then the other part, if you remember, Ann Westbrook's presented at our last board meeting, was that instructional continuity plan with a lot of really important work there about supporting particularly those students who are choosing the remote learning option. And so that instructional continuity plan that Ann Westbrook's presented, we're also as part of our 2 big district action steps this year. One is to support our campus in the implementation of 2 strong instructional strategies per core content area. And the second one is to ensure and to support them in the implementation of their instructional continuity plan. Again, keeping it straightforward, and really supportive of our campuses. And then you can see here, we set some district measures here in that 5 to 15 percentage points. And we are setting the target to the meets level, because we feel like it's really important. We can add a lot of different data and set the different goals, but if everybody's really focused on providing rigorous instruction, trying to get all our students across that line into the meets or masters area, we feel like we're going to get the biggest growth for the district. So we did set, versus setting a bunch of different goals at all the different levels, we're really setting a goal and saying this is where our target is on that meets level for this year. And that's at the district. And you can see here, again, those 2 goals. And this is just another way of looking at it. I will emphasize on that little, the top there is all oversight, but it's also support. So the district strategic actions, those 2 are supporting our campuses and those instructional strategies per core content area, ensuring that they're implementing the instructional continuity plan with fidelity. At the district level, we're doing that and supporting our campuses into their CIPs. So that bottom part's the CIP, and the top part is the DIP for this school year. So if you come here, there again is our measures of success, that 5 to 15 percentage points in the meets area in the core content areas. So we have set goals here, and you can see, and there is data in your binder related to early childhood too as well. We continue to monitor that, but here are some goals that we're setting in early childhood at the district level, and also goals that we're setting in the CCMR too as well. So that's at the district level. And now I'm going to walk you through what our campuses are doing and what you're going to hear more about on Tuesday evening too as well. So our campus plans. So the same document, going back, and you can see those 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is the campus portion. So the district goals, both our strategic actions and our goals are outlined in this workbook. But for the campuses, here's what we ask them to do. Sometimes the needs assessment is pages and pages long, but this year we've asked them also, again, streamlining. Our campuses are under a lot of pressure right now, and streamlining the process. We gave them 3 questions, but they're meaningful questions. So the first question is really asking them to identify community needs as a result of the pandemic. And you can see the question, what are some key takeaways about your community's needs that were illuminated by the remote learning transition? And a lot of our campuses are doing great things to support their families with the remote learning, but we are asking them to reflect on that as part of their needs assessment. And then to the 2 bottom questions there, you can see we are asking them to reflect in 2 questions related to data that they're looking at, reflecting on, to continue our path to improved outcomes that further close achievement gaps. So the 2 questions there is part of their need assessment. We are in a challenging year, but we do need to grow our students, and that's why we're using the BOI, because the BOI gives us a look at where our students are at and then grow them from where they came to us this year. So elementary, very straightforward. You can see here, and in the templates, they're much larger in your binder, but you got the core content area, and we're asking for them 2 instructional strategies. Mark Miranda, Kachara Bradford have been working with the campuses really hard on developing 2 strategies that are rigorous and that make sense for the different campuses. So they've been working with the campuses. You can see per core content tested area at the elementary, and then for elementary down there on the second page at the bottom is the early childhood. Middle school looks almost identical. Middle school got off a little easier than the elementary and the high school because they don't have that extra section on there. And then high school has the CCMR. Again, keeping it really straightforward for our campuses. And then other measures, as I mentioned, we asked each of our campuses to have 2 strategic actions related to social emotional well-being for students and also parent engagement. Ask each of our campuses to make a commitment to 2 strategies and to set some measures for success in those 2 areas as they support both our students and our families during this challenging year. And then, like in all CIPs, we do need some additional information related to funding, particularly those title funds that are so important to giving resources to our campuses. But we also tried to make this as easy as possible with the drop-down menus for them to quickly fill in. So again, the CIP process and the BOY data too, just as a tool, but to really kind of have the conversations with our campuses, set some really targeted strategies, and our campuses are all have worked very hard on that, but keeping that goal too as we use our BOY data that gives us a look at where students are and setting some goals for the year for our CIPs. I have a couple of more slides, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the next steps, but I'm just going to pause for a second. Does that make a little more sense when you look at how we're using it in the CIPs and using the BOY?
Are you able to drop campus-specific BOY data into their worksheets?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
I appreciate how much more simple this is than what has been presented to us as campus improvement plans in the past. This has the look and feel of something that your average teacher walking around the campus can digest and reconcile. And I don't think, when I looked at these before, my eyes crossed. And I look at data all the time. This looks much more manageable. So.
And I mean, when we were talking about our survey data, earlier, our campuses are stressed, and even before we had the survey data results, I think we all knew that. But, in developing this, we worked really hard with school leadership to make it streamlined. But again, I just want to say it has been a really meaningful process. And I think the next two slides, and I know at the beginning I mentioned, but the next step in the improvement process, I do have Dawn Oliver, our Executive Director of School Improvement. She works really closely with our assistant SUPs and Mr. Miranda with school leadership. And I know she has a little bit information about the next steps in this kind of process, because, doing your CIP, but if your CIP, I actually like that you were having like a 6 to 7 page document. Like you said, everybody can have that digested, read it. Sometimes when you get these, 80 page, you say, I'm going to read it, and then you read a little bit of it. But this is something that can be covered in staff meetings regularly, keep going back to it as well. But there's a lot of work to be done, because it's just a document. Even an 80 page or 7 page document is just a document unless it's used. And I do think the straightforward and streamlined was very appropriate this year with our campuses. But again, we really want it to be meaningful. So I'm gonna just I know Dawn Oliver and Jennifer, Dr. Cobb are on the line, but I'm just gonna go through 2 slides where Dawn Oliver, again, as she works with school leadership, can talk a little bit about next steps. So we have our CIPs, they'll be presented to you on Tuesday, but how do we make sure that our campuses are being supported as they implement these instructional strategies and do the work this year? Dawn?
Good evening, President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, members of the board, and members of the cabinet. I'd like to share with you 6 high-level actions that we're going to undertake this year to support our campuses, not only with their CIPs, but also those campuses who are writing a TIP or targeted improvement plan and making the connection for them as it relates to moving the students to improved outcomes. So you see here the first 3 of those steps in the improvement process. We're going to continue to look at this BOY data, as well as the data that we didn't mention specifically in the presentation, and then all the other types of data that we collect around assessments and academics. So in that vein, what we plan to do is to have data meetings that include the curriculum and instruction department and school leadership, so that we all have an understanding of where we are and where we need to go. And from that data review meeting, then we can develop the right steps to move the campuses and support them. And maybe that takes the form of campus visits, or it may even take the form of developing professional development that addresses common TEKS or common concepts that are not being mastered. So this is a district-wide support plan that includes workforce development, our school leadership team, and curriculum and instruction. In addition to that, we need to identify and support campuses with their colleagues by creating affinity groups. So those campuses that have identified common math or common science strategies, we want to put them together so that they can share best practices and share the strategies that are helping their students move forward. In addition to that, we're going to provide that customized support between assessments. We're not going to just look at test data that's given 3 or 4 or 2 times a year, depending on the assessment, but we're going to look at data in between and provide that support to campuses either at the request of the assistant SUP or those things that we just pick up on and say, these are needs that this campus is showing through their data. And not only do we need to look at assessment data, but we also need to look at other measures like attendance, grade failure reports, our course completion at the semester, and discipline, so that we understand more fully where our campuses can use the support. As it relates to the third process, we're going to, as we collect the tips in the latter part of October, we're going to make those comparisons of the actions that are identified in the tip and the goals that we've set for the CIP, so that our campuses understand that we're moving, we're all moving in the same direction, and that though the goals might have different verbiage or we might use different terminology, that we're really doing the same thing in these plans oftentimes. So crosswalking the CIPs and the tips to show schools and the district in general, where the connections are in the relation from academics to culture, leadership, and making sure that our families have what they need as well. And also, we'll be collecting the tips quarterly this year to understand which milestones were met and where we have a need to support implementation of the targeted improvement plans for those 21 schools. And then, of course, providing customized support by visiting campuses or having virtual meetings to make sure that they can meet the milestones that they've set for themselves and ultimately lead to student success. Any questions about this before we go on to the second set?
I did have a question about the CIP implementation and those affinity groups for
Yes.
campuses utilizing similar strategies. That sounds like a very strong strategy there. It's almost like the instructional groups that the teachers have. Is that what it's going for?
Yes, what we're going to do here is to review and find those schools that are doing similar work, or they're using similar products or tools, and make sure that we all have a common understanding of the best way to utilize them. Make sure that we have thought about maybe some unique or flexible scheduling that's happening with some of the tools that we use in our campuses. And just having another set of hands or another shoulder to lean on to help best implement the CIP. And perhaps those may even cross levels as we look at elementaries and middles, perhaps using similar tools or similar strategies. And then if the high schools, if we had something that was cross-functional, that would be even better. Okay, so the second half, we're hitting with number 4 and with number 6, 2 of the House Bill 3 measures, with number 4 and 5, 2 of the House Bill 3 measures that are required to be documented in our DIP and in our CIP. So as it relates to the CCMR, we're going to work with the CCMR data that we have coming in through Dr. Cobb's team, and looking at that data, not just for did the student meet the requirement for CCMR, but making sure that all of our student groups are making the necessary moves as well. And TEA has developed a tracker now for districts to use. We have something that we've used internally, but now the state is providing us a tracker, and we can utilize that with our assistant superintendent for high schools and his principals to make sure that as new data elements are available in the tracker, that we understand and plan for students who may need support in order to get the CCMR indicator. For early childhood, again, this is part of House Bill 3. We've established some early childhood measures to track literacy and numeracy. You've seen those in the CIP presentation this evening. We're also doing additional data analysis, not just of the campus overall performance, but looking at the specific sub-skills that make up this assessment. And in the binder this evening, you'll find some of that for the TPRI kindergarten and the pre-K circle assessment. Both of those tests are ongoing. Circle ends in approximately a week, and the kindergarten TPRI Tejas Lay ends about a week after that. What you do have currently, though, is the first and second grade TPRI data for the 2 completed grade levels. So there's lots of data that is important for us to monitor and not just support at the STAR tested grade levels, but also at the primary grade levels in literacy and math, literacy and numeracy. The other part of the Early Childhood Initiative is to ensure that we build capacity across the district and in our campuses so that we have the critical eye needed to make sure we understand what the TPRI, TEHASLE, and Circle data means and what gaps it identifies for us before we have students that come to 3rd or 4th grade who struggle with the concepts they should have learned in prior grade levels. And we'll finish off with the 6th high-level action related to supporting social emotional learning and parent engagement. And this is uniquely organized this year so that the departments you see listed in this column, nearly all are in the same org this year. So we have college readiness and mental health and counseling in the research and student success measures team. So we have an opportunity to meet more closely and more frequently in that we're all here together and making sure that we're tracking and monitoring those actions that we've required our campuses to include and potentially having those kinds of affinity groups for the parent and social emotional engagement pieces as well. Are there questions about this set of processes?
Are you finding Zoom meetings make these parent-school relationships and the school-to-school relationships easier to handle?
So I don't have direct information about that, but what I will say is that as we are working on our targeted improvement plans, the town hall forum that we've used in the district for the virtual open houses and some other events has been useful in us helping have more parents participate in the targeted improvement input session. So whereas sometimes the meetings are in the evening and it's hard to get back to the school, a parent may be able to log in from home and learn the same information. And we'll have over the next several weeks some data around the number of parents that do attend, at least as it relates to the targeted improvement plan meetings. So I don't have other firsthand knowledge about that.
Yeah, just to add to other, under Dr. Hinojosa, our family engagement, but we are seeing higher participation in our virtual meetings than we did for years, and particularly parent trainings virtual. I think it's something that we never really tapped into, but I definitely think there is the convenience of virtual is really conducive, and that's definitely not something that even after the pandemic we want to go away from, because our parents really participate at high levels in the virtual town halls, virtual trainings. I think it's just very convenient for them to do that at their home. And so definitely something that we're going to want to keep in the mix of our parent engagement activities going forward. Do you have any other questions for Dawn Oliver?
I have a question for you. Way at the beginning of your talk, you showed a graph that was not Spring ISD, but it was nationwide, that is really throwing me for a loop. And it's the one COVID-19 and growing achievement graphs.
Yes, that's the one that the TEA has presented quite a bit, but
if you could show that, because
I'll go back up.
The high income kids aren't just maintaining their growth, they're increasing their growth at home. So it's like their home is an enriched environment for them to learn. Is that what I'm interpreting here?
Yes, there's definitely that to the, let me see, I'm trying to get back to the slide. I'm sorry. There's definitely the gap is growing. I think that you're seeing both the growth and the slide on this. Let me see. I'm sorry, this is just not working for me today. It's gonna come, there we go. So absolutely, and that's to the gap. This slide is again being used by the TEA. They've used it in several presentations, but this is really demonstrates the growing gap. And I apologize again that our data on our sub-pops wasn't accurate. The screenshot was, because, you know, that gap and looking at the gap, that's something we want to be monitoring, particularly during this time as we look at, you know, national level research like this that's actually saying the gap is growing as a result of the pandemic.
I don't, you know, many reasons here that I'm brainstorming. I don't believe that high-income parents love their children any more than low-income parents or middle-income parents,
Right.
not by a long shot. I don't think that high-income parents don't have to go to jobs and leave children alone doing their work. So I think that that's a problem that middle-income and high-income parents at least might be the
Absolutely.
same. I'm brainstorming here.
Yeah, and I'm going to this other slide too, because I think this little asterisk at the bottom is an important asterisk to the slide, because as they look at it too, I do think our programming in the spring, when I listen and talk to other school districts, the programming and the curriculum, you know, offering that our CNI department was able to provide for our families, I do think was richer and more rigorous than, you know, in some other school districts. So part of the slide was in the springtime, to your point, Dr. Jensen, in the springtime in a lot of school districts, there wasn't much instruction going on. So if you think about that, you know, the economic gap, your wealthier families were able to supplement that. They were able to supplement that with tutors, with all different types of activities and enrichments, and just having access to the technology that we've talked about this evening too as well. So all of that, both in the spring and at the beginning of this, you know, fall, I do think, you know, higher income were able to supplement. But I do think in some ways our spring programming was richer and more rigorous than some other school districts were able to turn on a dime and provide to students when the closures happened.
There is some evidence in your beginning of the year results that the empowered learning at home is outperforming the face-to-face. I think that this is, you know, I haven't got any decisions here, or it's just you've provided some very thought-provoking data here that I really would like to know what's going on.
Yeah, and Dr. Cobb, is that we are looking at those numbers closer. So the difference that we saw on the BOY between our empowered learning, our remote learners, and our in-person learners, we're also looking, we're going to do some data analysis on the profile of those students. So looking at, you know, did higher achieving students, are they maybe staying at home more, the remote, or their parents are choosing that option more? So that's
self-selection, yes.
Right, so
Yeah.
we're definitely looking at that too as well. And I did tell you that our first cut with Dr. Cobb looked at it. There is definitely a little bit of the lift on that empowered learning coming from our elementary grades, which is possible that maybe some parent assistants were there. But we're definitely looking at that. But we are trying to slice and dice the data in as many ways as possible to give us good information as we make plans. And so, but sometimes, you know, when you look at data, then it reveals the need to look at more data and to slice it a different way. So we're definitely looking at that.
Also, please look at the effect of the after-school programs. I have a high respect for the out-of-school programs that go on, whether it's Scouts or some of the programs we provide. I just think this is very interesting.
That's where you finish. Okay, Mr. Brown, I'd like to know which three schools will be presented on, are the three schools in the book templates, all of the three schools?
No, sir. We're still taking a look. We're gonna bring you back three schools, and if you see some when you get your binders that you'd like to hear from, we'd be happy to entertain
Will
that
we
as well.
know?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
I believe it's tomorrow.
If we'd like to add a school, we can request to Dr. Watson. I'd like to know which three schools.
Okay, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We would put it, yeah, we put you through it.
I'm glad I changed my mask. That other mask would have driven me crazy, so.
Thank you, Mrs. Donna Oldfield. Thank you. I saw you change your mask, so I knew that you were ready to share a lot of information with us. And you have given us homework for the weekend. So thank you. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our General Counsel, Jeremy Brinkley.
Good evening. So tonight we have the second reading of Board Policy BBA Local and the second reading of policy revisions per TASB Local Update 115. And so I know in September we went through each of these and talked through each of these. I know the board has looked at them in depth. And so with your permission, what I'd like to do tonight is ask if the board has any questions about these policies that are on second reading.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to commend our governance committee, who's chaired by Ms. Trustee Durant and Dr. Jensen and Winfred Allen. I want to commend them for the great work that they're doing. Being a part of the state legislation committee, I see a whole lot of things going on at the state level, and I just wanted to tell y'all that y'all doing an excellent job. We're ahead of the crowd. Some of the issues that we're dealing with, the state is leadership TASB and leadership committee is dealing with at another level. And the schools, there are many schools that have many challenges. So Trustee and Durant, we're ahead of the power. We're doing a good job. I'll just commend you guys and your subcommittee for the excellent work. All your policies, especially the one that, the very first one in the book. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's been a great collaboration with administration as well. It's a great thing.
Well, thank you all. With that, if there are no questions, I would ask that these be placed on the consent agenda for Tuesday night.
Hearing no questions, thank you, Mr. Brinkley. These will be added on the agenda, a consent agenda for Tuesday night. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Executive Chief of District Operations, Mark Miranda.
Thank you, President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, members of the board. I'm going to be, if you could follow me, I'll be on page 98 of your packet. We're going to have, I have 5 items to bring to you tonight. The first item is for the 2020-2021 instructional calendar revisions. You may recall that in May, the Board of Trustees approved an intersessional academic calendar. At the time, the information that we had from the Texas Education Agency recommended adopting intersessional academic calendars so that school districts could have flexibility in making up days potentially lost due to COVID. Since that time, TEA has revised guidance allowing for funding for remote instruction. So originally we believed we would have to physically make up any day missed. Now we know that we could go into a remote environment if we needed to do so. So this gives us an opportunity now to be able to realign our instructional calendar back to a traditional calendar while still maintaining a couple of much needed calendar breaks. And so we're not completely eliminating those. We'll have a couple of those in these. And so with this revision that we'll be able to show you here in just a second, the last day of school for all grade levels would be June 4th instead of May 28th for seniors and June 25th for all other grades. We have done a survey and we have these online, but I'm going to share my screen to show you the 2 options that we presented. And so, and you also have these in one of your folders. I believe it's the green folder to be able to take a look at the calendar options. So the first option, option 1, and obviously we're in the middle of October, we're October 8th at this point. And the significant things that you'll see from this one, and you may be able to see it a little better in your packet, but the significant thing you'll be able to see here is that the blue shaded squares, the blue shaded dates, if you can see that on the screen, it's very close to the green, but the blue shaded dates are our calendar breaks. And so we had more of those in the original. This one is going to give us a calendar break at the end of October. That'll be October 30th and then November 2nd. And obviously November 3rd is Election Day. And so all of those would be student and staff calendar breaks or holidays. So that would be October 30th, November 2nd, and then obviously the 3rd Election Day would be for students and staff. Then through November, we have our normal Thanksgiving break for that week of the 23rd. December has our typical winter break from the 21st through January 1st. We have the MLK Day on the 18th. And then when we get to February, we have 2 more calendar breaks, 2 more days, the 11th and the 12th. Again, this is option 1 that was presented to our ACE committee for feedback and also online as a survey. And I'll show you the survey results here in just a minute. So February has 2 more calendar break days, the 11th and the 12th, which if you look at that month of February, there are no other breaks in that month. And so this would be a good time to be able to have those breaks in the middle of that month. We are hearing from teachers in terms of the fatigue level is pretty high right now. And so being able to do that is really important. March, we would have our typical spring break. April, we have our spring holiday there. The orange that you see on the calendar are the STAR testing dates. And so we just wanted those on the calendar. Those are important dates. And then you'll notice through May, we go through May, and what we'll do is we'll end June 4th, so that first week in June. A lot of the feedback that we received on the original calendar is that we were ending for most of our grade levels at the end of June. So going into about half of the summer month was pushing into that. And so that was causing, for some people, causing some concern. I'm going to show you option 2 now on the screen. Option 2 is a little bit different than option 1. If you look at the October 30th and the November 2nd dates are not there in this option 2. Instead, those calendar breaks have all been moved to that February. Whereas in option 1, February has the 11th and 12th. Option 2 carries 4 days during that week of February, the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. That is the primary difference between the 2 calendars is the breaks that you'll see there from for the calendar breaks. Everything else on these calendars remains the same, including the June 4th last day of instruction.
So, may I ask?
Yes, sir.
May I ask? Why was the change on option 2? That came from the ACE committee. You know why? In option 2, you got the 4 days in February versus the 3 days in November. What was the consideration for that?
The 4 days in February, when the committees were putting together these 2 calendar options, they were looking at having those breaks in February leading a little bit closer to the STAR testing dates. And so giving an opportunity to refresh in that spring area so that we do have some potential to do some work with students potentially on kind of a volunteer basis if we wanted to do that, similar to what we already do from a tutoring standpoint on weekends and different things. That would have given us an opportunity in February to do that on a longer day break. But as you'll see on the survey, there was an overwhelming majority of people that responded in favor of option 1. And so what I see here that I've now put up on the screen is the survey that we did. The majority of the respondents, as you can see there, were parents, grandparents, and relatives of current students. We had about 40% of our respondents were parents or in that category. Another 27.5% were from instructional staff, which another very important group that we wanted to have an ear to be able to hear what they considered in these 2 options. And then of course we had students and then other school staff, and then the remainder come from community members, central office staff, and alumni. But the large portion of these respondents are parents and teachers. And so if we look at those are really some of the important people to be able to see. So if you go to the next slide, I went over one more too
That's
far.
interesting because historically we see the teacher population and staff more usually will submit.
Yeah, and we think maybe one of the reasons is because of the
Parents.
situation that we find ourselves in. And you were talking earlier about parent engagement, and we
another
have seen
example.
across the board parent engagement. Parents can walk over to their students that are being taught from home, and they can walk over and look over the shoulder of their students now and see the level of instruction and input even sometimes into that, what's happening there. And so it's really been exciting to see the level of engagement that we've had, probably at some unprecedented levels before. And being able to get our Chromebooks out and try our best to close the digital divide has been really important as well in that endeavor. So that's a great observation that we did have a lot of parents involved in the survey. So you can see from the donut charts here that the blue are all option 1. That's that first option that has the calendar break in October, November, and then the 2 days in February. Overwhelmingly for staff, it was 78.9%, for students 82.2%. For communities, 69.5%, a little bit lower, but remember they had a lot of people that responded to that. And so the overall respondents was a whopping 75.4% majority for option number 1. So I would be happy to entertain any questions that you may have. What we would like to ask, that if the board was comfortable, we would love to have a vote tonight on the option 1 or 2. We obviously are recommending option 1 in alignment with our community input. If we are able to have a vote and approval tonight, we would really like to be able to start communicating this to our community so that they can begin to make plans as soon as possible. If we do go with the option 1, which is being recommended, that first break is at the end of this month. So we really want to be able to get the communication out as soon as possible.
I have a question on the STAR testing dates. Why did those change? Was that something TEA gave us, or it looks like they're changing from what's our current calendar to
I see
what?
Jennifer jumping on the screen, so I know she's ready to answer that question.
I'm still here. It's because we are planning to do the online administrations, and the online administration windows are different than the paper test, and they're a little bit longer to allow for that administration because of the need for the disbursement of technology, and it just takes longer to do online versus everybody having a piece of paper and taking it at once.
So we do it all online or blended?
The current plan is all online.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? If not, I will now entertain a motion that the Board of Trustees approve the 2020-2021 realignment to the instructional calendar, specifically option 1, as recommended by the administration.
Madam President, I move that the Board of Trustees approve the 2021 realignment to the instructional calendar, specifically option 1, as recommended by the administration.
Do I have a second? It's been moved by Kelly Hodges, second by Winfred Adams, that the Board of Trustees approve the 2020-2021 realignment to the instructional calendar, specifically option 1, as recommended by the administration. There's no other discussion. I will now poll the board. Will now poll the board members for their vote to approve the 2020-2021 realignment to the instructional calendar, specifically option 1, as recommended by the administration. Winfred Adams Jr.
Aye.
Kelly Hodges.
Aye.
Deborah Jensen.
Aye.
Justine Durant.
Aye.
Janet Gonzalez.
Aye.
Dawn Davis.
Aye.
And myself, Rhonda Newhouse, votes aye. The motion carries unanimously. So thank you, Mr. Miranda. And as you indicated, we do need to get this information out to our community and staff as quickly as possible. So thank you.
Thank you very
Please
much.
continue to your next item,
Sure.
Mr. Miranda.
If you would join me on page 99, we'll go to the next item. The next item is a memorandum of understanding with Lone Star College for preparatory mathematics and ELA courses. And so the recommendation is for the board to approve the memorandum of understanding. What this is for a partnership with Lone Star College to create courses, again in math and ELA, for students who have not demonstrated college readiness. So these aren't college or dual credit, these are college readiness courses. These are for students who haven't yet demonstrated that. This is coming through advanced academics to be able to get those students up to where they need to be. And so this is an agreement with us and Lone Star College, an MOU.
Where are these going to be administered?
Sorry?
Where are these classes?
These classes will be administered at our high schools, at Westfield and Decatur. Yeah, yes.
Are they content similar to the remedial ones that would normally see when they enter Lone Star?
Yeah, I think the whole goal is so they don't have to take remedial
Exactly.
classes.
Right.
And when they get there and waste money.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Hinojosa, do you have anything else to add to that?
Just to say exactly that, and we've partnered with Lone Star for the past 6 years, and it allows our students to get that college readiness so they can go straight into a college level course. And they are taught here at our campus, and we have our teachers that have the curriculum. Curriculum and instruction partners with Lone Star to ensure we're covering both the needed college courses and the high school instruction.
Then I feel bad because this is a renewal.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can we see the success of it? Do we have a way to measure? This is, I mean, I'm excited. I don't know how I missed we were doing it before.
I think, Ms. Durant, one of the pieces is that we are increasing the number of students in the program. And initially, when we first started this, not all of our high schools were offering these courses. So it is actually, part of House Bill 5. So it goes back a while, and we've been increasing the numbers, and that's what you see with the partnership in advanced academics and curriculum, and then of course Lone Star College.
How is it offered to the students? Like, how do they know about it?
So our counselors, as they're advising the students and as they're doing their 4-year plan, monitoring where they're at, and I think Dr. Watson was talking about the college readiness, and those students that are not quite there, we want to make sure and make it part of the offering. So you'll see students taking it their senior year, but it is part of the advisement that the counselors do.
So, Dr. Hinojosa, my understanding is that when kids matriculate to the junior college, there's an assessment they take that determines whether they need remediation. Do we have access to the success rates for the students who do this course?
I'm sure we could probably pull that out. I see Dr. Cobb nodding her head. It is part of the data that she could slice and dice for us, but absolutely we have that opportunity to track the number of students that take the TSI assessment and those that have been in these courses also.
So I know historically I ran into some admission people at Lone Star that spoke to the level of remediation in our Spring ISD students. And so to see this program is really exciting. And I don't know how I missed we were doing it, but I want to continue to do it. And I want to actually take a look at how successful it is and where we can continue to improve upon it. So.
Absolutely. Dr. Cobb, we have that information, and so we can get that information to you. We look at it every year.
Dr. Hinojosa, at the Spring Early College Academy, I know students take the TSI their freshman year of high school. So they are obviously not 12th graders if they don't pass it as a freshman in high school. Do they get special tutoring, or does this apply to them?
Yes, so our part of the agreement with Lone Star College and our early college program is that we have access to their academic advisors. And we actually, the earlier we're able to give this to the students, the TSI assessment, the better. And that's part of the work that Dr. Cobb has been doing as part of the CCMR, and actually allocating funds to do the prep and do early testing. I know we have, the vouchers that we give to our students. So Dr. Cobb, I don't know if you want to talk about our TSI project that we have to increase those numbers of students that are ready to avoid that remediation.
Right. So in the past few years, especially with the CCMR bonus funds, we now pay for all of the students that take advantage of it, their TSI-A assessment. They're able to do those assessments at the high school campus, so they don't have to go to Lone Star to do that. So that's for your spring early college students, as well as any high school student that's interested, and they can do it at any grade level. We use that. We also do in the 12th grade, because we want to make sure to maximize our CCMR points. We actually have tutorials and kind of a identification. We do identification of students that are close to meeting that TSI-A criteria that haven't reached it yet. This year we have partnered and have a tutorial program that Dr. Hinojosa was referring to called Apex. And that's going to be available at all of the comprehensive high schools. And it's actually TSI test prep, but the product also provides SAT and ACT prep. So we can reach a multitude of different students. So they may be already TSI ready, but wanting to have some access to, College Board access tests or College Board tests that they need additional remediation to. So we're piloting it this year. And then we hope to go larger and broader to reach a wider population of our students.
Excellent.
Any additional questions on that?
Please continue, Mr. Miranda. Thank
Okay.
you.
If you would join me on page 106 for my third item. This is the notice of grant award for Spring ISD's 21st Century Community Learning Program. The 21st Century programs serves students and families across 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools, using a STEAM-based program that provides ELA, math, and science tutorials, STEAM enrichment, family engagement opportunities, college, career, and military readiness opportunities. This is the 5th and last year of our cycle, so this is a renewal also. One interesting thing is that our program director, Carla Wiley, you may remember her as Carla Jones Taylor, but she changed her name a year ago in marriage. She's actually recently been selected as one of 12 directors to be a part of the TEA Best Practices Institute in this 21st Century program. So across the entire state, she's one of 12 that'll be providing best practices to TEA on this program. And to be able to show specifically what we were asked for was how to integrate curriculum into these programs. And so we're really excited about this program going forward and would like to ask for renewal for this.
I know you just mentioned this is the 5th. Is this the,
yes.
Are we planning to?
We do plan to re-up
I mean, a couple
yes.
years ago, when we
I'm
just
sorry.
had a conversation, we had an option to get extension for longer.
We're going to reapply.
Thank you.
We're going to reapply.
Thank you.
Yes. If there are no questions, I can move to my 4th item. My 4th item is on page 108. This is the Child Care Local Match Contribution with the Gulf Coast Local Workforce Board for the 2020-2021 school year. This is a program that's located at Westfield High School. If I can find my notes, yeah. This is a program located at Westfield High School for any teen parent who has children, regardless of the school. The district provides transportation, pickup, and drop off between daycare programs and to the School of Attendance. We have a capacity normally of about 83. This year's capacity, due to the situation we're in, is roughly half of that at about 42. And we cover infants, walkers, 1 to 2 year olds, and 3 to 4 year olds with this program. This is a matching fund. And I believe the pledged contribution from the Workforce Board is $250,000. We're asking for acceptance of this agreement.
Chief, it's half because we don't have as much need for it, or because we don't have?
Because of the social distancing and the COVID requirements in terms of facility space.
Okay.
And yeah.
I talked to Ann yesterday about this. So will the amount stay the same regardless of the fact that we're going to have meeting half of the population?
I believe the contribution amount will
It
stay.
stays still be the
Yes,
same
sir.
regardless?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So does that mean that we're not serving some of these mothers?
I'm sorry.
So if capacity was 83 before,
Mhm.
were we using all of those seats?
I don't know exactly, and so maybe Dr. Hinojosa
I
might
have
know.
that data, Mr. Miranda. Is last year we had 39 students in our program, and this year so far with the students returning to campus, we have 16 so far that we are serving, but as they continue to matriculate back, we'll continue to accept them so that we can get up to that 42. But last year we had a total of 39. We had 10 infants, 8 that were the walkers, which is the 1-year-olds, 11 that were between the age of 1 and 2, and 10 3 and 4 year olds. This year we have 7 3 and 4 year olds, 7 of the 1 and 2 year olds, 2 of the walkers, and we don't have any infants yet.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't leaving anybody.
No.
Okay.
If you would then turn with me to my fifth item. This is the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Agreement. This is the board resolution that 4-H will be considered as an extracurricular activity, and that the board will recognize the extension agents as adjunct staff. And so for 4-H, this gives students who are part of 4-H the ability to participate in 4-H and not be counted as absences when they participate. 4-H participation allows students who are not part of the CTE Ag program or pathway to participate in extracurricular ag-related activities and events and shows. It also allows elementary students and middle school students to participate. There's usually between 30 to 35 students that participate in 4-H.
Trustee Gonzalez, how is the 4-H program going this year?
I think they just had their first meeting a couple of weeks ago. The membership is down a little bit, but we still have students evidently that are traveling to some of the local shows. I know just these state fair wasn't as big as it normally is, but they did actually have a market show. So some of the kids were able to participate. So we're hoping those numbers pick back up as everybody gets more comfortable attending events and shows. But yeah, we're doing pretty well on it, I think. Thank you for asking.
There's some good news.
If there are no questions, that concludes my presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Police, Kenneth Colbert.
Good afternoon, Madam President, trustees, and Dr. Watson. Can I have you move to page 128? This is introducing you to a new partnership or MOU between Spring ISD and Texas A&M, their engineering extension services team. So this is a new partnership that we're entering in. We're asking you to consider and move to consent agenda for us. This partnership will allow Texas A&M to have access to our facilities specifically for their forensic investigation training group. And so they would have the ability to use our facilities for crime scene reconstruction or just basic crime scene investigation classes. And in exchange, they would allow us to report our TCLOS training. We're not a licensed provider. We can provide training or give training to our staff, but this allows us to report our Texas license training through them. And actually, you consider to move this to the approving and moving it to the consent agenda.
Chief, what facilities are these? Are these schools, or are this your wonderful, enlarged and wonderful police department now? Or is it like the grounds? Oh, I'm interested.
Yeah, so they would like to use our training facilities specifically for classrooms, but they've also expressed interest to use any of our facilities for any type of crime scene reconstruction. Obviously, we have some beautiful grounds and some wonderful spaces so that they would be able to use anything from the football stadium to one of our schools.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure with your new nice facility, they would want to use your facility as well, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No other questions? We will continue. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Westbrooks.
Thank you, President Newhouse, members of the board, and Dr. Watson. We have quite a few items this evening, a couple that are very exciting because it's that time of year again. So our first item that we have is the 2020 appraisal roll certification. And so that is our certification of our property tax values for all of the properties that are taxable within the Spring ISD boundaries. And that item can be found on page 132 of your packet. And so what you have there is the certification of appraisal roll document that we receive from the Harris County Appraisal District each year. And this is the value that we use in order to set our tax rate, which we'll talk about in just a few moments here. And so I wanted to just walk you through what numbers you see on this document, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what they mean for us in terms of setting our tax rate. So the first number you see is the total appraised value, and that's that $16.2 billion. So that's the total market appraised value of the properties within our boundaries. The second number is the taxable value. So appraised, and then there's exemptions that, such as homestead exemptions, that bring the market appraised value down to the taxable value. So the first taxable value that we see is that 13.6 billion. That's the values that are on the appraisal roll. They're not under protest and they've been certified. The next number we have is the 1.62 billion number. And so those are taxable items that are on our roll, but they're under protest. So the values have been provided to the taxpayers and they've protested those values and they're still under protest. But the value that you have here is the amount that would be the value if the owner's claim of value is upheld. And so that's the more conservative. Sorry, Mr. Miranda went to talk to them about that because they started right around the time I was coming on. So I'll keep talking. I'm sure. Can you hear me?
We're having a hard time hearing you. I know Mark is having the construction stopped or paused momentarily. And if it's still loud there,
it's not.
It stopped, okay.
And I knew Mark was on his way up there. I think he got to him just about then. So the second number is the 1.6 billion, which is the values that are under protest. And so what the appraisal district gives us here is the value that would be assessed if the owner's claim of value is upheld. And so that's the more conservative value, which means that if the appraisal district and the review board disagrees with the owner's value and comes in higher, then our value would go up from this number. So it's the more conservative number. And then the last number is 198 million, and that is the taxable value or taxable property that's not under protest, but it's not yet included in our certified appraisal roll, which means it's not in that 13.6 billion. So if we add those three taxable items up, then our taxable value that we'll use to set our tax rate is $15,469,286,244. And so that is our certified values at this point in time. And a copy of this was actually included in the board update a couple of maybe about a month or so ago, because we, as a part of Senate Bill 2, now we have to provide a copy to the board, even though we wait until now to really talk you through it as it relates to the tax rate. So that's our first item. And if there are no questions on this item, then I'll move into our next item, which is the actual setting of the 2020 tax rate. And you have a copy of an infographic that's included with your packet, and I'm going to put a copy of it up on the screen as well. Okay, so I can no longer see you. So if someone can let me know that you can see the infographic on the screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start from the bottom of the graphic at the eraser and work our way up to the pencil point. And so at the bottom here, House Bill 3. So there were lots and lots of changes that happened as a part of the 86th legislative session. And a large portion of that was the tax compression that was a part of House Bill 3. So we saw in the first year of the biennium that all tax rates, that first dollar, were compressed down to 93 cents, or they were compressed by 93%. And so in the second year of the biennium, there were additional changes that was more compression of the tax rate that was based upon the property value growth. So as part of House Bill 3, we were introduced to two new terms. And one was no new revenue. So that's the no new revenue rate, which replaced the effective tax rate. And so it's abbreviated as NNR. And basically what that rate means is that it calculates what is the tax rate that we would need to produce the exact same levy that we had in the prior year, but using the current year's value. And so that's where that language comes in, where we hear that we've had an increase in the tax rate effectively, even though the overall tax rate has decreased. And so that language didn't completely go away, it's just been changed. And so now we're saying no new revenue versus effective tax rate. The other term was the voter approved tax rate. And so that is still the highest tax rate that our Board of Trustees locally can adopt without having a tax rate election and going to the public to receive approval for a higher tax rate. And so in the past, that rate was referred to as the rollback tax rate. And so that is the rate that we do our calculations based upon, and we can't bring a proposed tax rate to the Board of Trustees that's higher than that rate. So we receive now 3 different calculations of our taxable values. So with us being a June 30th fiscal year end, we always pass our budget based upon that first estimate of our property values that we receive in April. So we receive that, that's normal business as usual. But as part of House Bill 3 and the new tax rate laws that came out as part of the 86th legislative session, now we also receive an estimate of our property values in July. And we're required to do a calculation using our truth in taxation calculation that says what is the no new revenue rate and what's the voter approved tax rate that we're anticipating based upon that estimate that we received in July. And then we're required to provide that estimate to the Harris County Appraisal District, and it goes on the transparency website for the appraisal district, so that anyone in our community that wants to know what our values are and what our rates are proposed to be based on those July estimates, that data is available to them. Now, the value that we just spoke on a moment ago is the certified value. And that's the value that we recalculate, that truth in taxation calculation. We use that to actually propose the final tax rate that we bring forward to the Board of Trustees. So what we talked about just a moment ago with that certified appraisal roll is this number that you see here, that $15.4 billion in taxable values, which of course, as mentioned earlier, includes the values that are already certified on the roll, taxable values that are under protest, and those that are still listed as uncertified. So I mentioned earlier that the tax rate compression in the second year of the biennium, which is our 2020 tax rate, is that first year that we compress our tax rate based upon our property value growth. So our property values from the 2019 tax year to the 2020 tax year grew by a total of 7.8%. And based upon that amount of growth, that's how much our tax rate, our maintenance and operations tax rate, had to be compressed. And so that this year is the first time that we heard the terminology maximum compressed tax rate that had to be calculated by the Texas Education Agency and provided to us so that we can create our property tax rate calculations. And so that's where you see on the graph the change in our property values over the last 5 years. And then just what's notably for this year in our calculation is the change between 2019 and 2020. And so just as a reminder, yes. I'm sorry, was there a question? No? Okay. Just as a reminder, our tax rate is broken into two pieces. We refer to one as the maintenance and operations, which is the M&O portion of the tax rate, and that's what supports our general fund budget. And then the interest in sinking, which we refer to as the INS tax rate, supports the debt service portion of the budget. So if you're at the very top of the pencil with us, what we're going to be looking at on Tuesday evening is the proposed tax rate, and we'll be asking the board to vote on it. So I wanted to show you the comparison of our tax rates and how they've changed between 2019 and 2020. So in 2019, the compressed tax rate was just across the board. Everyone's tax rate was compressed by 93 cents, or excuse me, 93%. So our tax rate prior to the House Bill 3 was $1. So when it was compressed, then we're at 93 cents. Then you add the golden pennies, and we've talked about golden pennies in the past. And so we add the 4 golden pennies to that. So for 2019, our total maintenance and operations M&O tax rate was 97 cents. And our interest in sinking portion that supports debt service is 46 cents. And the total tax rate is $1.43. In 2020, this is that year now where our rate has been compressed even further based upon our tax growth. Our calculated maximum compressed tax rate is the 88.43. And that's again based upon the property value growth between 2019 and 2020. That's our calculated amount. And the tier 2 golden pennies is still that 4 pennies. Something that's new now, if you'll notice, if you're following along on that third row, it says unanimous board vote. So in order for us to levy that additional penny, we will need on Tuesday evening a unanimous vote from our Board of Trustees that are present on Tuesday evening in order to get that additional penny. And so the total maintenance and operations rate that we'll be seeking the board's approval on Tuesday evening is the 0.9343. Based upon the information that we had in April and our April estimates and the growth that we knew of in April, we passed our budget based upon an M&O rate of 0.9377. So we weren't that far off. It's just change in the growth between what we knew in April versus what we knew in August. And then our interest and sinking rate, based upon the growth in our property values, we're able to decrease that rate from 46 cents to 45 cents. So the total proposed tax rate is 1.3843 cents for this next year. And so that is the rate that we're proposing to support our general fund budget and our debt service budget for this 2020 tax year.
So that's a decrease. That's good news.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Do we know, based on what we normally use, the average home that's $100,000 in our area, what that is savings?
I did a calculation. I didn't do it on the average home, and I can definitely calculate that and share it with you on Tuesday. But I did do a calculation on a $100,000 home. So if a home was $100,000 appraised value in 2019, and let's assume that there was a 2% increase in that home's value. So now it's 102. The total tax on that same house in 2019 would have been about, I believe it was a savings of about $6 or $7 in that scenario, just that scenario. So it is a savings overall, but what we always have to remind our taxpayers is that the tax rate is going down, but as values are going up, they may not necessarily see a decrease in their tax bill. And sometimes that's difficult to explain, but in this case, just using that one scenario, it is a decrease, minimal, but it is indeed a decrease.
Thank you for anticipating my question.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Westbrooks, I think I saw a comparison of school districts' tax rates in the community impact paper. Did you see that?
I do not recall seeing that one. I've seen one on another school districts, and everyone was still setting their tax rates, but what I did notice is that we're more comparable now than we have been over the last several years.
It appeared we were the lowest of surrounding districts, so I was just very interested in that.
Okay, I'll seek that out, Dr. Jensen. That would be great if we are. That would be really good. Okay, so the takeaway from that item is 1.3843, unanimous vote on Tuesday evening. And if there are no more questions, then I'll move on. I'll move on to the next item, which is our taxpayer refunds for the month. And that item is on page 138. I'd just like to ask if there are any questions.
I just would like to ask about the economic health of our area, as you see by the tax rolls. I was under the impression that 1 out of 5 businesses are going out of business, and it just sounds like a dire situation nationwide. Is that happening as well in the Spring ISD area?
We haven't seen so many businesses closing, completely closing. What we're going to pay close attention to is over this next year, whether or not we start to see them close. We haven't seen it happen just yet, but there's a lot of panic and concern that we might start seeing some of that happen over this next year. And we were pleasantly surprised that our values came in so close to the estimates that we had received. And it's going to be an interesting year, and paying attention to what's happening nationwide with the economy and how that impacts us locally. And we've been reading a lot of the comptroller's estimates that he's putting out right now, and basically just saying it's more uncertainty than we've ever dealt with in the past. So everything is just, it's kind of wait and see what happens. But we haven't seen it happen yet, but we certainly anticipate seeing some of that happen.
Thank you for sharing, because I'm asking you something that's out of your responsibilities here, but thank you very much for sharing what you're seeing with tax rolls.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. If there are no questions, then we'll keep moving to the next item, which is a report of cooperative purchases that exceed $50,000. And that report is on page 141. We only have about 5 items on there this month. But as always, I'd like to ask if there are any questions.
I just think all the public should be interested that it's about $58,000 in wipes, disinfectant spray, gloves, and then on down, disinfectant spray and multipurpose wipes is another $228,000. It's not cheap trying to stay away and stay healthy from a pandemic.
You're absolutely right. And we're continuing to see those costs every day go up. And our challenge right now is just ensuring that we can continue to source the items so that we can keep our inventory replenished. And so far we're keeping up pretty well with that. Okay. If there are no additional questions or comments on that item, I'll move to the next item, which is on page 143. And this is a follow-up to a request that was made by you all at our last board meeting, and that was to secure a testing partnership so that our employees would have access to testing for COVID-19. And so we have entered into a corporate account agreement with Houston Medical ER, who has a location, or actually 3 locations, one that's right near the administration building. There's a Spring location off of Rayford Road, and then there's a Clear Lake location. And we've set up a corporate account which allows us to, using our protocols and processes and procedures that our emergency management team has set in place, when an employee needs to be tested, they can go to this site and they offer rapid testing, and they will receive their results within about an hour. And the employees have the ability to use, if they're on the district's insurance, there's no cost because the TRS medical plans are all zero cost for testing until the end of December as of right now. If they have any other private insurance, it's likely that those tests will be zero cost as well. And then this organization also has an agreement with a state program that even if we had an employee that were uninsured, that they could still receive the testing for free. But as I mentioned, we have a corporate account that allows any employee that we send, regardless of their circumstances, that they will not have to pay anything out of pocket, because the district would pick up the cost for any employee that didn't fall into one of those first 3 categories. So that is up and running. We've had it available for about 2.5 weeks now.
So I happened to come across an article, and I can't recall. I have to go back through my browsing history and find it, but it was a report on urgent care centers and private ERs gouging insurance companies for COVID testing. And so I know you watch out for this sort of stuff, Ms. Westbrooks, but if we ever see any of those bills, how TRS is billed for that, I'd be curious to see whether some of the numbers that I saw in that report are borne out.
Thank you. We'll be on the lookout for that. And TRS has done a really good job here lately of producing some reports to the districts, because we're all in an effort of trying to bring the cost of the plan statewide down. And so I will certainly share that if we receive some reports that has some of that cost included.
I'll be sure and try and find that for you, and I'll send it to Rodney.
That is accurate, that it is happening. But the insurance companies are monitoring it too, so I'm sure TRS is as well.
Okay, if there are no additional questions or comments on that item, then we'll move to our next item, which is on page 147. And this is a waiver for Texas 2TA for pregnancy-related services. And it's a waiver that we bring to the board about once every 2 years. And what it is that our students who are pregnant or are postpartum, they are receiving instruction and postpartum instruction from home. And what this waiver allows us to do is to offer on-campus instruction for those students that are in that postpartum period after giving birth. And the reason for that is allowing them to come on campus to receive a portion of their instruction, because we could have students that do not have the proper technology at home. And more importantly, also, it allows an opportunity for those students to become reacclimated to the school environment. And so the waiver allows them to get that on-campus instruction as part of their postpartum period as they're transitioning back to campus. Okay. Hearing no questions, I'll move on to our next item, which is on page 150. And so this is a cooperative agreement that we're seeking the board's approval on. We're currently had an agreement with U.S. Communities, which is a purchasing cooperative, and they were purchased by a different purchasing cooperative, Omnia Partners. And so what we're asking is to create an agreement with Omnia Partners, which will allow us to continue to utilize the vendors under this purchasing cooperative that we were able to use when they were U.S. Communities. And just to name a few of the vendors that we use as part of this, this cooperative agreement that we had with U.S. Communities, such as Ricoh. Ricoh is the copier company that we have copiers and workroom copiers all across the district. So that's a really big one. Grainger is another organization that we're able to contract with through this cooperative agreement, and that's for maintenance supplies and materials and things of that nature. So several of our day-to-day type vendors are part of the U.S. Communities purchasing cooperative that has now been bought by Omnia. So we just need to have an agreement with Omnia to continue our relationship. Any questions related to the purchasing cooperative? Okay. Then the last two items, excuse me, the last two items that I have are two requests for proposals. But before we get into the two requests for proposals that we'll be seeking the board's approval on Tuesday evening, I wanted to take just a quick moment to remind everyone of how we go about the process of creating the request for proposals that we bring forward to the board. So anytime that we have a product or a service that we anticipate the cost will be more than $50,000, we start seeking a way to contract with that vendor. And so first we look to see, or contract for that product or service. First, we look to see whether or not we have a current vendor that can provide that service or that product for us. And if not, then of course, next we look to see if we have a cooperative that already has a contract in place with that vendor. And if so, then we take advantage of using a cooperative agreement. And in some cases, as you've noticed in the past, there's an opportunity to bring forward an interlocal agreement with another governmental agency that may already have a contract and has already gone through a competitive process and sourced that vendor. And so those are our first three options. And if none of those options are available, the next thing we do is we move towards creating a competitive solicitation. And so we work with our internal subject matter experts to determine what the specifications are, what's needed to provide that service. And we develop that solicitation and we post it through a service that we have called IonWave. And so it's posted on our website. We do an advertisement in the newspaper that says that it's out there, and it's available for about 2 weeks. So vendors have an opportunity to become a part of that and to respond to those bids in one of two ways. So one is when the subject matter expert comes to us and says, we need widget X, they're also going to provide us with a list of the companies that they're aware of that provide those widgets. And so when the solicitation goes out, we would contact those vendors and say, we have a solicitation, here's how you can view it, here's how you can respond and be a part of it. So that's one way. The other way is that always on our website, a vendor has the ability to register with us and tell us what products, what services they provide. And by just doing that, anytime that we have a solicitation for those products or those services, we'll automatically send a notification to them letting them know that it's available. So after the solicitation's been posted, we get our responses, we tabulate those responses, we pull our evaluation committee back together, and they look at the responses and use the predetermined scorecard criteria to come up with a score. And then that score ranks the vendors and ultimately helps us decide who is the best value, best vendor that can provide the service or product that we need. And then that's how we come forward to the board with the recommendation of a vendor that we're recommending the board to award. And in some cases, and we have an example of that this evening, some cases that can be a two-phased approach, where the first phase is we look at pricing, we look at their abilities and all of that in phase one, and we qualify and maybe move 2, 3 or more vendors forward to phase two, where they'll come in, give a presentation, tell us more about the services and products that they offer. And then we make a selection in phase two. So that's the process that we go through each and every time that we have a competitive solicitation that we ultimately bring to the board for your approval. So with that, I wanted to take us to our first request for proposal that we're seeking approval, or will seek approval on Tuesday night. And that is a district-wide pre-K through 12 equity audit services. So we issued a solicitation and the district was seeking an equity audit that would be conducted to evaluate and identify racial, economic, gender, or disability inequities across the district that hinder access to teaching, learning, programs, and resources that lead to excellent, equitable student outcomes. And so we had 5 vendors that responded to that solicitation that we put out. And in phase one, we selected 2 vendors that would move forward to phase two based upon their responses, price, services that they could provide, and how well their services matched up to the district's needs. And we moved to phase two. They came in, did presentations, and then we're recommending Cambridge Education to provide that equity audit for the district. And so that's the vendor that we're recommending for award on Tuesday evening. And if it is okay with the board, we would have that item on the consent agenda. You all are very quiet, so either you're tired or my screen has frozen.
I was
part of
looking
the
for a
data
price,
we use
Ms.
with that.
Westbrook. It said over $50,000, but I wonder how much over.
It's about 127,000 is the total cost.
Is this data will be something we'll start off with utilizing in our equity committee?
Absolutely, yes.
It's a good place to start.
When are they available to start?
Dr. Hinojosa, do you have an exact date? It will definitely be after Tuesday.
It will definitely be after Tuesday and after our steering committee. We are in the process of naming our steering committee. We want the committee to come together, and then the vendor would be meeting with our committee to set the framework, and of course our superintendent. So we're looking at late October, November to look. If you'll recall our timeline, we had us starting in November.
Will they have a team that will be traveling here to do the audit?
Yes, ma'am. And we talked a little bit about it. As Ms. Westbrook said, we actually went into phase 2 and had the opportunity to interact directly with their representatives. And we talked about what that would look like in a virtual environment. And so Cambridge definitely will be bringing staff members here, but also is seeking the opportunity to do virtual assessments, walkthroughs of buildings, and of course, all the desktop audits and things like that.
Understandable.
Ms. Westbrook, you mentioned that the advertisement or the RFP is posted in newspapers. Which newspapers are those?
Typically the Chronicle in some cases, and I know we've used local papers too in the past as well, but typically the Chronicle. Okay, if there are no further questions on that item, then we'll move to the last item, which is a request for proposal for global culture competency development. And in this request for proposal, the district was seeking to collaborate with a vendor that was capable of designing a customized and unique curriculum that incorporated global competencies and resources that could become the property of Spring ISD upon completion. And so there were 4 vendors that responded to this RFP, and all 4 of those vendors, upon evaluation and the tabulation of the responses, all 4 of them were deemed to be capable of providing the services that we needed. And so the district is recommending that the board approve all 4 vendors to be utilized as needed throughout the year for these services.
Is this similar to the International Baccalaureate program? I know this is a big emphasis of their curricular program.
Yes. Yes, it is. And Ms. Bradford, I don't know if you wanted to add more to that.
Yes, we are seeking to partner with a vendor for to support both our International Baccalaureate program at Springwoods Village, as well as other choice programs such as the one at Bammel Middle School that we are planning and working through this year, as well as our dual language programs. So at many different campuses, looking at expanding our global culture and studies programs throughout our curriculum.
Thank you for
There's
that
no
explanation.
Texas organizations out there, no Texas vendors.
Several of them.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Several of them have offices here in the Houston area, actually, and 2 of them are Texas-based vendors, and then some have locations outside of Texas, but in Texas as well.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about what they do. Can we get some literature? 'Cause
yes,
this is new to me, and I want to understand better what they're doing.
I did some volunteering and work with Springwoods Village Middle School last year, and got to look at especially science, of course, the curriculum. And it was really fascinating to me, the global perspective. And I think I'd love to hear more information, support you, Ms. Durant, and I'd like to see more, because what I saw with the International Baccalaureate is it was high academic rigor, but it was, I think, really preparing kids to be ready for entering a global economy.
So one of the things we can do at our November work session is we can bring a little bit more about global studies, but also have Ms. Cully come from Spring Woods Village and present to you all the update of where we are with the IB and how they're integrating the cultural studies into their curriculum.
Perfect, thank you.
I got to say, at the time, I was jealous that Spring Woods had this and the other middle schools didn't, so I'm especially glad to see this.
And that's really our goal, is to embed this within our curriculum so that all of our campuses will have access to it, but especially for our choice programs like the one we're designing with the international studies and culture at Bama Middle School. We've partnered with a few of these vendors before. Last year we worked with them as part of our summer learning program. They helped us with different project-based learning just to get the global studies and that international perspective into the curriculum as we look at language and culture, so we can bring back more information and how we want to utilize them as a resource to design our curriculum.
Okay, President Newhouse, if there are no more questions, that was the last item for me.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrooks. And seeing as how there's no other items on tonight's agenda, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Madam President, I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
It has been moved by Kelly Hodges and second by Justine Durant that the Board of Trustees adjourn this meeting. I will now poll the board members for their vote to adjourn this meeting. Winfred Adams Jr.
Aye.
Kelly Hodges.
Aye.
Deborah Jensen.
Aye.
Justine Durant.
Aye.
Jana Gonzalez.
Aye.
Dawn Davis.
Aye.
And myself, Rhonda Newhouse, votes aye. The motion carries unanimously. There being no further business, this meeting is officially adjourned at 9:06 p.m.